Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's Mutant Necromancer. Chapter 21. It has to be said that the demons have very cunning eyes, they know very well which heroes are worthy of being corrupted. Although the Blood Crow is only a small boss with the lowest difficulty in the game, in the real world, her shooting skills are definitely not weaker than anyone. Now, she has fully proved that she is not in vain. The Blood Crow's shooting skills can only be described in one word, that is, fast, extraordinary fast. Ever since she walked out of the Gru camp alone in her teens, Morena has spent her entire life fighting against demons. There are many kinds of demons, and they are good at various attack methods. Morena is an archer who can fight all demons with just a bow. She even faced the fearful demon King Diablo. Maybe it's the difference between life and death. Archery on the battlefield has no pretentiousness at all. The competition is who shoots faster, more accurately and farther, and Morena is one of the best. Picking up the bow, Morena seems to have restored the Amazon female warrior. The heroic figure stood there as if a Blood Crow had been reborn. Bending the bow, setting the arrow, and shooting, just these two simple actions, completely suppressed Dr. Lizard. The long bone arrows hit his body as if they were teleporting, exploding, and the various elemental attributes on the arrow made it so embarrassing that it couldn't be resisted at all. After a round of arrow rain, Dr. Lizard only dared to hide behind the concrete platform and did not dare to show any more. Although he could regenerate his limbs, it didn't mean he didn't feel pain, and the regeneration of limbs would also consume a lot of his energy. There is another powerful guy here. My God, why is such an ancient weapon she uses still so powerful? Frank stared dumbfounded at Morena in the distance, but the skin of Dr. Lizard, which could not penetrate even an assault rifle, could not be stopped. Rena's long arrow. This simply overturned his cognition, although his cognition has expanded a lot after Cain and Peter. That's because the power of bullets comes from dead objects like guns, and the power of Blood Crow's bow and arrow comes from himself. The body is the strongest weapon that can constantly break through the limit. Cain said, in fact, this kind of power is also it comes from the power of puppets summoned by priests of Rothma. This is one of the most powerful summoning spells of priests of Rothma. It requires a high degree of compatibility between the heroic spirit and the summoned objects used, and the quality of the summoned objects is also very important. Bullseye's ability is originally shooting, which fits perfectly with Morena's attributes. When her soul merged into Bullseye's corpse, coupled with the strengthening power given to the puppet by spells, it created the current situation. A super puppet Blood Crow. It can be said that this shooter who combines the abilities of Bullseye and Blood Crow has surpassed themselves in strength. With the suppression of the Blood Crow, Dr. Lizard was finally unable to swim around, and Cain immediately seized the opportunity to go around to his side. Bone prison. 8 thick joints rose from the ground, firmly immobilizing Dr. Lizard. Aging. After adding the curse of aging to prevent Dr. Lizard from getting out of trouble for a while, Cain launched a life siphon at him. This genetic organism is full of vigorous vitality, and the short life siphon made Cayenne not only made up for tonight's consumption, but also had a lot of wealth, which surprised Cain and increased the intensity of the siphon. He didn't intend to suck him to death, but he wanted to gain more based on the principle of not wasting. It's just the spirit. Wait, a spider thread stuck to Cain's arm and interrupted his spellcasting. Spider-Man turned up from the outer wall of the building, holding a blue bottle in his hand. It seems that he said antidote. Hey, Death Whisper, he was just a doctor with a broken arm before his transformation. He is a good man, and he hasn't caused irreparable mistakes. I think he can be saved. Cain and the others came to help after all. For himself, this also made Peter speak in a negotiating tone, unable to be as confident as he was in the hotel. Can you guarantee that he won't have any more problems? Cain stopped the life siphon. Although he was voluntary to help, it is not a bad thing to get a favor from Spider-Man. No. But we can't waste people's lives just because he is a potential threat, can't we? He hasn't started doing evil or hasn't succeeded yet. I have an antidote here, and he will return to normal soon. All he does is in his body. This is not his intention. Peter is still trying to convince Cain. Frank, what do you say? Cain turned his head and asked, and the Punisher also came from a distance. This is your trophy. Frank shrugged, signaling that such troublesome things should not be asked of him. Cain took another careful look at Dr. Lizard with the eyes of the spirit. Indeed, Under Peter's stop, he has not killed anyone yet, and he has no grievances on him. Okay, Peter, you should use the antidote as soon as possible. As long as he returns to normal, I won't do it. Thank you, buddy, I'll be fine soon. Peter was overjoyed, and hurried to the atomizer on the top of the Osborne building, replaced the blue bottle of antidote with the green gene medicine inside, and as he pressed the button, the antidote was launched into the air and exploded. After a cloud of blue smoke passed, pieces of snowflakes floated down, and the special police officers who had been infected by the drug began to transform into human forms. Although Dr. Lizard at the top of the Osborne building is the most infected one, he is also the one at the center of the atomized antidote. Pieces of snow fell on his body, and large green scales began to peel off. His body began to slowly transform into a human form, and of course, his regrowth arm also melted in the antidote. Things that don't belong to me will eventually be lost. With the deepening of the antidote, Dr. Connors finally recovered his human form, and with the change of appearance, it seemed that his reason and so on had all returned to himself, and he collapsed. He muttered to himself on the ground, could it be that interracial genetic fusion is impossible, then my research for so many years is not in vain. Seeing Dr. Connors like this, Peter didn't know what to say. His intention was good, but the result turned out like this, and he might have to spend the rest of his life in prison. However, none of the people present noticed that the camera installed on the roof of the Osborne building recorded all of this, and Norman Osborn watched the whole process. Tisk tisk, what a pity. I originally hoped that Dr. Connors would come up with something interesting, but these guys ruined it. It seems that I have to do it myself. Norman Osborn pouted and turned off the TV, turned around and walked into a high-tech laboratory, where countless mechanical arms were assembling something. He passed through these workbenches and came to the innermost independent sterile laboratory. Here, a large bottle of green liquid is being poured into small syringes, and the surroundings of the laboratory are already covered with medicine boxes containing such syringes. The crisis in New York City was saved amidst the cheers of the people. Spider-Man also handed over Dr. Connors to the police and accepted the applause of the people, while Kane and Frank quietly left the Osborne building from behind. The reason is also very simple. With their behavior style, they should not be a role model for the public, especially children. Compared with them, they want to be the nightmare of criminals. Seeing that they cannot be persuaded, Peter has no choice but to give up. Frank, go to my place for a drink later. You can't stay in that sewer all the time, the humid environment will damage your health. It's okay to have a drink. Anyway, New York City has been relatively quiet recently. Unfortunately, their plan ended before it even started. Just after walking out of the back of the Osborne building, 3 black SUVs stopped in front of them, and the rear door of the one parked in front of them opened. The man in the suit came down, looked at them with a smile on his face and said, "Hello, my name is Phil Coulson, an agent of the Homeland Strategic Defense, Offensive and Logistics Support Bureau. An old friend wants to meet you too. S.H.I.E.L.D., the famous Marvel violent agency Kane is familiar with. However, because he was indirectly killed by the Black Police, he didn't like government organizations. Moreover, he remembered that S.H.I.E.L.D. had actually been invaded by Hydra on a large scale, so there are even Hydra people in the high level, and there are a few really good people in this intelligence agency, so he has kept a respectful attitude towards S.H.I.E.L.D. from the very beginning. Invitation, can I refuse?" Facing Kane's obvious refusal, Coulson's expression did not change. "Sorry, Mr. Joe, I'm afraid you can't refuse. We are a government department and have the right to investigate you and the unknown persons in your family." Whether S.H.I.E.L.D. is S.H.I.E.L.D., Kane secretly sighed in his heart. Let them know his identity after all, but it seems that they still don't know the real identity of Morena, because after Kane contacted Morena in his heart, found that he was not caught by the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. Fortunately, S.H.I.E.L.D. is not an all-knowing and omnipotent god, or there are some things that can be hidden from them, and hiding them is equivalent to hiding Hydra. In comparison, those guys are really unscrupulous in their actions. Woolen cloth. Kane, let's go. If they have bad intentions, these people will not be here. Strangely, Frank didn't have much reaction, but turned his head to persuade Kane. No way. Kane followed Frank into the car after calling Morena home in his heart. The convoy drove into the basement of an inconspicuous old building. Kane and the others followed Coulson to the top floor, where they met Nick Fury, who still liked to look out the window with his hands behind his back. As soon as they entered the door, Nick Fury turned around, looked at Frank with his only remaining eye and said, "Long time no see, Frank." Hearing this, Frank also had a complicated expression, and he replied after a while, "Yes, it's been a long time, sir." Kane looked at the two of them in astonishment, never expecting that they still have such a relationship. "Sit down." Nick Fury gave way to the sofa, and then sat on it first. However, Frank didn't have any intention of reminiscing about the old days. After sitting down, he asked directly, "Why did you come to us?" "I have a task I want to ask you to help me, I hope you can agree." "Is it a mission that must die, so many people under your command don't use it, but come to us instead?" Kane sneered, "S.H.I.E.L.D. has its own action team, what mission must be completed by the two of them? You must know that Frank is just an ordinary human being, and he is just emerging, so this kind of temporary mission is probably extremely dangerous." Government officials at the level of Nick Fury would not even frown at the sacrifice of a street hero. Only when they are strong enough to be at the level of the Avengers can they make him compromise. Kane asked himself that he was still far away from the Avengers. He is neither an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., nor a symbol of the American spirit, nor is he a powerhouse of the Hulk or Thor level, so he deliberately refuses. At worst, the shop will be seized and he will go into the sewer with Frank, which is better than rushing to his death. Frank didn't speak either, as if he had acquiesced in Kane's speech. Unexpectedly, the relationship between Kane and Frank was so good. Nick Fury finally took a look at Kane. "The reason why I am looking for you is because you are the most suitable for this task. The candidate is even more suitable than my agent." "What mission?" Kane frowned, he couldn't think of any mission that they had to do. Nick Fury glanced at Frank, and the Punisher remained silent, showing that everything was dominated by Kane. There was no way. Cyclops had to open a folder on the table, took out a photo and put it on the in front of them. Tony Stark, the boss of Stark Industries, the largest arms company in the United States, disappeared 48 hours ago during a weapons demonstration in Afghanistan. All infantry squads were killed at the scene. Nick Fury waited for Kane and the others to see clearly. "I hope you find him and bring him back alive," he said after touching the bearded man in the photo. "Why do we need to find people lost by the US military?" Frank finally spoke. "Because his father's name is Howard Stark, one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury looked at Frank and said, he knew Frank's character, so he said without any concealment, "In addition, I have given 48, they found nothing, so I have to send someone I can trust to find it myself, and the most suitable person I can think of is you." "Well," Frank nodded to express his understanding, but he suddenly stared at Nick Fury and asked, "Then why do you want to involve him?" Nick Fury knew that he was referring to Kane. Since the death of Frank's family, it was the first time he saw Frank showing such an expression. "You know, from the video held by the S.H.I.E.L.D., Frank has not used it in the past 4 years. No matter how cruel the method of killing is, the face is expressionless. It is a state of ashes. He just kills purely for revenge. In that abnormal state, as long as he feels that revenge is complete one day, he ended his life immediately, but now it is different, he finally has someone he values, which also makes Nick Fury feel gratified as his old friend." Nick Fury once again took out a photo from the folder and placed it in front of the two of them. It was a group of gun-toting thugs. From their attire, they looked like people from the Central Asian region. What is noticeable is the wall behind them. The hanging flags are 10 rings with words written inside, and in the center of the rings are 2 machetes. This is an emerging terrorist organization that has only recently entered Central Asia, the 10 Rings Gang. Their development speed is very fast, and now they have replaced the original terrorist organization there. From various signs, it seems that some of them have mastered similar magic. The ability. Speaking of this, Nick Fury looked at Kane. "We don't know much about this ability at present, so we want to use the ability of this Mr. Joe." Kane and Frank looked at each other. "I'm afraid this task cannot be refused. As for whether the 10 rings really have magical abilities, it's hard to say for the time being, but Kane's mastery of magic has been known by S.H.I.E.L.D. The reason why he hasn't been brought alone for questioning is probably because of Frank. S.H.I.E.L.D. can tolerate Frank killing people in New York City all the time, not only because he has no superpowers and is not under their control, but also because of Nick Fury's understanding of him. Since Frank can accept Kane as a companion, then Kane the position is still trustworthy, but S.H.I.E.L.D. will not directly classify him as a reliable superpower, This task should be regarded as a test for him. If it can be completed, S.H.I.E.L.D. is treating him will probably change as well. Okay, we have taken over this mission. When are we going to leave? Now. Kane followed Frank and walked out the door. He couldn't help but look back at the photos on the table. Tony Stark, Iron Man, I don't know what kind of person you are in this world. The long-range delivery capability of the US military is really not covered. After more than 10 hours, Kane and Frank have come to Afghanistan and boarded a transport helicopter, accompanied by a team of S.H.I.E.L.D. field troops. Not Coulson, they are the kind of agents, but real special forces, which S.H.I.E.L.D. recruited from the top special forces in the world. Of course, they are also arrogant people. The conductor expressed their dissatisfaction. Hey, boss, I remember that you have experienced the Iraq War and the Libya War. Why did the higher-ups send a perverted killer who slaughters unarmed hooligans in a comfortable New York every day to lead the team? A Special Forces member asked loudly on purpose. Almost everyone knows the name of the Punisher, but few people know his previous experience in the army. Frank closed his eyes and rested there as if he didn't hear it, but Brock Rumlow, the captain of the Special Forces, sternly stopped his team members. Shut up, because he used to be the Special Forces instructor of the Navy SEALs, and got the Medal of Honor, and you weren't Harry when he fought in Afghanistan. Frank still didn't open his eyes, but no one in the cabin dared to sneer anymore. But Kane asked curiously, Frank, have you ever fought here? Frank finally opened his eyes. Yes, I fought here during the Cold War. At that time, the enemy was the Soviets, and my boss was Nick Fury. Oh, no wonder you call him officer, but I don't think your relationship is very good. Quote. That was the last mission. We were ordered to destroy a secret base of the Soviets, but left some traces. In order to eliminate these traces, Nick Fury ordered to blow up the entire village, and there were dozens of locals since then. I have retired from the frontline troops and started working in training. Kane remained silent. This war trauma may also be one of the reasons why he became a Punisher, this cold-blooded guy. Quote. He is a pure soldier who even sacrificed his own life to complete the task, but he is good to me. He has helped me survive in New York for so many years, but when I see him, I will think of those innocent villagers. Help. Yes, you were so seriously injured that night and you didn't see anyone help you. It's impossible for him to pay attention to me all the time. He will only take action on some major events. Otherwise, why don't you think there were no police the night you killed Jigsaw? Those gunshots were enough to alarm them. Oh, no wonder I felt that something was missing that night. It turned out that they made the move. Kane suddenly realized that his appearance also caused the corners of Frank's lips to curl up. He can even accept Nick Fury's mission. The relationship between him and Nick is not as simple as he said. Sir, we've arrived. Bullock leaned over and said loudly. The helicopter had landed slowly on a dirt road. Although it had been searched by the US military once, there were still some shrapnel and blood left on the side of the road. Frank jumped out of the plane with his gun on his back and carefully observed these traces. Kane was wandering around like a normal person. It has been nearly 60 hours. It is impossible to leave any soul here, so he has nothing to do here. Any role is not even as good as the members of the special forces behind him. Let's go. Not long after, Frank stood up and walked towards the plane. Where are you going? Brock asked. Mountain area. They can use missiles to attack the convoy. They are definitely not ordinary gangsters. They must be the elite terrorists. Shouldn't they be hiding in a certain city? Bullock asked quickly, fearing that Frank would stay away from the battlefield for too long. Frank glanced at him and shook his head. The Afghans have been fighting since 30 years ago, and they know better than you where it is safe, especially after provoking people who cannot be provoked, although they have been controlled by the Ten Rings, but I believe that those who have experienced the Ten Rings gang will definitely make use of it. Although he was noncommittal about Frank's judgment, Bullock still faithfully carried out the order. After all, the order given to him was to obey Frank's command, and he was not responsible for finding Tony Stark. The helicopter turned and flew towards the mountains. Frank continued to close his eyes and meditate. Afghanistan is a mountainous country, and mountains are their most common landforms. The rest depends on Kane. Fly east. After half an hour, Kane suddenly came to the cockpit and ordered the pilot. What's there? A lot of dead air. The pilot was stunned for a moment, looked back, and happened to meet Kane's all-white spirit eyes. The pilot swallowed, and immediately turned the nose of the plane without saying a word. This time they didn't fly for too long, and soon found a small village in front of them. The plane landed outside the village, and all the Special Forces members immediately raised their guns and formed a battle formation after getting off the plane. Kane ignored them, and strode towards a big house at the entrance of the village. His spirit eyes had not been closed, and he could see the soaring death energy emanating from there. Boom! He kicked the door open, and Kane's face was instantly livid. This place should have been a warehouse, but now it has become an execution ground, with blood, dead bodies, and countless flies flying here. Frank and the Special Forces all changed their faces when they saw this scene. Men, women, children, this doesn't look like a terrorist organization's way of recruiting soldiers. Although the Special Forces did not continue, Kane also understood a little bit what he meant. Now it is different from the past. Although Afghanistan is quite poor, but not many people are willing to do the kind of head-raising activities of terrorists, so these terrorists came up with a new trick. When they need soldiers, they go to the village, kill all the adult men there, and kidnap women and children. Women can work for them without resistance, and children will be brainwashed by them to become their fresh blood, but it is different here. It seems that the whole village has been slaughtered. The flames of anger burned in Kane's chest. Too many people died here. In Kane's sight, countless resentful spirits were entangled and howling together, accusing the injustice of the world, especially those children, who have not yet realized the wonderfulness of this world was ruthlessly killed, which made Kane, who had never really seen this scene, arouse infinite killing intent in his heart. Pa! A big hand rested on Kane's shoulder, and Frank pushed his body up. These things happen here every day, even in a world with sound rule of law. There will be similar things. When laws and axioms it has lost its effect, and only the punishment of death can prevent such things from happening again, which is also the value of the existence of people like us. Frank's words suppressed the evil fire in Kane's heart and turned it into a determination to uphold justice. Just as Kane was about to nod, he suddenly found a strange breath in his eyes. He immediately ran there. It was a very ordinary dwelling. Guided by the eyes of the spirit, Kane came to the backyard, pushed away a pile of firewood piled there. He searched carefully, and finally found a pull ring hidden in the ground. There was a sharp cry from the cave. A boy about 10 years old was waving a hatchet there, and he kept saying something, but Kane couldn't hear it at all. Understand. It was in Pashto, and he was saying, "Devil, executioner, go away, I will not join you when I die." This kid should be a survivor, and his family is probably in that house. Frank translated behind Kane. He has been fighting here for a long time and he is proficient in the local language. The little boy Zaire finally disarmed and walked out of the cave under the explanation of Frank and Kane, and told them his name. Later, he also found his father's body in the warehouse at the entrance of the village. The boy wiped away his tears after a good cry and asked Kane if he could get him a gun, only to discover that the boy spoke fluent English. "What do you want a weapon for?" Kane frowned. "You should go to school. Revenge is not something you should do at your age." "No, sir, my teacher is dead. He is my father and the only relative I have in this world. There is no extra money in this country to support an orphan, because there are too many orphans here. I either the government army joins the 10 rings, there is no other way, so, sir, I beg you, give me a gun, and I will avenge my father." Although tears were still hanging on Zaire's face, but his gaze was extremely determined, and there was only vengeful anger in it. Kane and Frank were familiar with this gaze because they had both experienced this process. But agreeing with Zaire's point of view does not mean that he will agree with his approach. Kane squatted down and said to Zaire, "Your father gave his life for you. He must not want you to avenge him. I will take you send it to the nearest town, and you have to live well to live up to the sacrifice he made for you." Zaire struggled for a while, and finally nodded sensibly. The children here are very precocious. They may not have received much education, but they understand the difficulty of survival. Although he doesn't think Kane is right, but maybe that's a better option. However, Bullet came over and reminded, "Mr. Joe, it has been more than 60 hours since the target was attacked, and his chances of surviving are getting lower and lower. We don't have time to do other irrelevant things." When Kane was about to argue with him, Zaire said, "Are you looking for a team from the 10 rings? They stopped here 3 days ago. How do you know they belong to the 10 rings? Kane asked quickly. We are far away from the city, and we always use donkey carts when we go out. Only the government army and the 10 rings gang have cars, but there have never been government troops here. Zaire told what he knew cleverly. 5 days ago, people from the 10 Commandments gang surrounded the village. My father hid me in a cave. 3 nights ago, when I came out of the cave, I found a convoy driving into the village from the southwest. I found that the 10 Commandments the gang came back, so they hid in the burrow again, but they didn't stay here long before heading northeast. Bullock and Frank exchanged glances. This place is far away from the activities of the 10 rings. They will not appear here for no reason. It happened to be the day when the U.S. military convoy was attacked. Moreover, they massacred the entire village to hide according to their whereabouts. This group of people is very likely to be the target they are looking for. Ready to go. Bullock began to greet the Special Forces members. Wait a minute, I'm going to take this child. Kane said to Bullock. We are going to war, and taking this child will kill him. Brock said with a frown. His subtext is actually that this child will hold them back. When you find Stark, will you come back to pick him up? You don't need to worry about his safety, I will take care of it. Since it is easy to talk and discuss, Kane doesn't intend to talk nonsense with him. He directly hugged Zayal, walked to the helicopter. Hey, you can't bring outsiders into the helicopter. As soon as Bullock's voice fell, the Special Forces members pointed their guns at Kane. They may still have a little respect for Frank, but that doesn't mean they will recognize Kane. This slender boy. It seems that I am the supreme commander here. Frank stood in front of Kane, pointed at the guns and ordered, take that child and go. Seeing that Frank had spoken, the Special Forces looked at each other and had to put down their guns, watching Kane carry the child onto the plane. The plane took off and headed northeast, and a series of mountains appeared under the belly of the plane. Kane opened the eyes of the spirit again, but the search range was not much larger than the naked eye, but it was not affected by obstacles. Are you looking for those bad guys from the 10 Rings gang? Zaire suddenly asked Kane. Yes, they took a very important hostage, and we are here to rescue him. I think I might know where they are. Really? Kane looked at Zaire in surprise. Well, I lost a goat in my house some time ago. I came here to look for it. I saw a group of people from the 10 Rings gang transporting weapons here. I thought they were just passing by, so I didn't tell others, but it didn't happen. Our village was surrounded by them in 2 days. Zaire lowered his head, obviously blaming himself for his actions. Kane touched his head. That's none of your business. Since they have been preparing for it so early, they are determined to win this matter. Your village can't escape this disaster. Afterwards, he looked up at Frank. Although Zaire's voice was not loud, he didn't turn his back on Frank. He just didn't want the Special Forces to hear him. He could tell who was good to him. This place isn't rich, and there aren't many nearby villages. I'm afraid these new 10 Rings gang are our targets. It's worth visiting. Frank immediately brought Zaire to the cab and asked him to help guide the direction. Zaire, who was flying for the first time, was looking for a destination from the sky for the first time. After looking for a long time, he finally found a reference object. Look at the Eagle's Mouth cliff, I remember it, there are 2 hills to the right from there, almost there. Okay, land there, let's go there on foot. Frank said loudly. No one raised any objections to this. They are here to save people, not to force the terrorists to tear up their tickets. Sneaking in quietly is the best solution. The helicopter landed in the valley. Kane and the others all got down, entrusted Zaire to the driver and started walking to the location indicated by him. Zaire knew that he could only make trouble for them, so he stayed in the helicopter obediently for them, praying, especially for Kane and Frank. Team Brockett is the top Special Forces of S.H.I.E.L.D. They are proficient in combat in various terrains. As soon as they enter the mountainous area, they start to march quickly. This is somewhat to give Kane and the others a warning. Just now Kane and Frank's behavior can make them feel uncomfortable. But unfortunately, their little trick is destined to end in failure. Needless to say, Frank, the Punisher who returned to Afghanistan, walked briskly among the rocks like a snow leopard, without even kicking a piece of gravel. N followed closely behind him. Priest Rothma was not a weak mage. His physical strength and agility definitely ranked among the top 3 in the team. Zaire was right. The special forces found the enemy's secret whistle just after they climbed over 2 mountain ridges. Of course, these secret whistles did not serve as a warning to Kane's spirit eyes, and they didn't even find any enemies. It was already nailed to the ground by the bone spear when it got close. Finally, after solving the 3 secret sentries, they came to a valley, and the noisy voice showed that this was their destination. Kane looked over and saw that this small valley was full of all kinds of munitions, even missiles. The experienced terrorists pulled up camouflage nets above the munitions, which has never been discovered here. One of the reasons. There is a cave at the end of the valley. There are the most militants near there, and they all look around vigilantly with their guns in hand. It seems that there must be some important person or thing in the cave. Bullock, as the commander of the special forces, observed more carefully than Kane. There are preset heavy machine gun positions on the hillside. We can't go down without solving them, but there is still a circle of bunkers there. It is difficult for us not to alert the enemy. Get rid of them. And Frank saw more things. Not only that, there are enemy snipers on the top of the opposite mountain. Those 2 bushes are, and do you see that big rock? There must be rocketmen ambushing behind it. These guys' tactical literacy is too high. No wonder the government army can't resist them at all. Bullock felt a little tricky. Why don't we attack at night? Frank shook his head. Look below. They even have the most advanced missiles of the US military, and the possibility of having infrared night vision devices is very high, and if they also have thermal sensors, the probability of our exposure is even higher gone. Then what should we do? Should we call for backup? It's too late. The shorter the time to rescue the hostages, the better. Kane. Can you see what's going on in the cave? Kane's spirit eyes have never been closed, but the cave is very deep, and the innermost part is almost beyond his line of sight. There are many people in the cave, but most of them are concentrated at the entrance and middle of the cave. There are also 2, but I can't see clearly because it's too far away, but the resentment of the people at the entrance of the cave is stronger than those outside. Frank understood what Kane meant. The people inside the cave killed more people and were more elite than those outside. This shows that the other party is not only afraid of people outside entering, but also preventing people inside from coming out. This is also very consistent with terrorists taking hostages' characteristics of detention. Frank patted the shoulders of the 2, and retreated to the back of the ridge. I have a plan, Brock. Your men and I will attack the enemy together. We must be fierce, so that they have no time to care about other things, and Kane, the most important task of yours is to enter the cave and rescue our target. Are you so sure that what's inside is the target? Brock said, puzzled. The combat mission is not successful. From the information we have obtained, the possibility of the target location. This is already worth our hands. Is the mission completion rate of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Okay, one last question, are you sure this kid is okay? He's better than your entire team. Now that Frank, the commander, said so, and with the magic that Kane shot to kill the secret whistle just now, Brock stopped talking nonsense. Everyone checked their equipment and entered their attack positions. Fire! As Frank's order came from the earphones, the members of the assault team immediately followed him and jumped out of the ridge, raining bullets on the terrorists in the valley. The sudden attack wiped out the bandits of the 10 Rings gang confused. They didn't expect that someone would dare to attack them in broad daylight, and a dozen or so exposed guys were knocked to the ground in an instant. The machine gun position has been guarding against the direction of Taniguchi. When they turned their guns to the opposite hillside, a powerful rocket sent the heavy machine gun and its operators into the sky. At the same time, the snipers of the special forces had already fixed their target in the first place, and then aimed their guns at the big rock from left to right, and the rocketmen who ran out from behind were hit by them. No, not a single rocket was fired. However, this does not mean that the enemy is finished. Following a roaring order, a group of vicious gangsters rushed out with the latest rifles, and gave Frank and them a head-on blow. These guys don't just shoot indiscriminately. The rookies, after suppressing Frank's charge with the barrage, they immediately found a nearby cover and started shooting short bursts, and the accuracy was not much worse than that of the team, and they even failed a player who couldn't dodge. A bald man with a fierce face came out of the cave and directed the gangsters. He himself was shooting with an assault rifle, and he was quite accurate. However, this was also in Frank's plan. Attracted by their frontal attack after losing firepower, Kane was able to approach the cave from the side. Blood Run, one of the 3 major magic systems of Rothma Priest, one of the blood spells, and the first blood spell mastered by Cain. This spell will disperse Rothma Priest body into a cloud of blood mist, and then appeared 50 meters away and gathered together again. This spell is very useful on the current battlefield. No one will care about a cloud of blood fog on the battlefield where someone is killed at any time. Cain, who appeared at the entrance of the cave in a blink of an eye, helped the wall of the cave. This spell is not without consumption. Unlike the bone spell that consumes the soul, most of the blood spells consume the blood in the caster's body. Therefore, this kind of spell is not possible. Casually released. Looking back at the battlefield where the fierce battle was taking place, Cain gritted his teeth and immediately rushed into the hole. There was no time for him to rest now. Not all the terrorists from the 10 Rings gang ran out of the cave. The bald leader just left 10 of his subordinates in the cave. There was nothing wrong with his arrangement. Sufficient time to kill the hostages. Unfortunately, what they encountered was a super-powered opponent, and precise shooting could not penetrate Cain's bone armor, but the body armor on them could not stop a bone spear. Cain fired bone spears while running fast, and the bone spears shot with hatred pierced directly into the foreheads of these bandits without exception. The 8 blocking gangsters failed to slow Cain's footsteps, and they fell almost at the same time in a split second. Seeing the 2 figures running into the cave, Cain released Blood Rush again without any hesitation. In front of the 2 of them, as soon as he turned his wrists, 2 short-handled bone sickles appeared in his hands and he swung them back fiercely. Soaring blood mist sprayed in the cave. After killing the last 2 terrorists who wanted to enter the hostage room, Cain combined the 2 short bone scythes into a 2-handed long scythe, and split open the large iron door of the hostage room with one blow. A white man with a glowing light bulb on his chest saw Cain in bone armor and holding a sickle, and the hammer in his hand fell to the ground. Ethan, pinch me, I'm not dreaming, Death himself harvest my life. Mr. Tony Stark, I don't know if the god of death will harvest life himself, but if you don't come with me, without him to harvest, your life may come to an end. Cain replied, and finally confirmed that the goal is in front of him. He also relaxed a lot. He has been in this world for a while, and he already knows that reality is different from movies, and any accident may lead to a different direction of events, and he can save the living Iron Man is still pretty good, at least he doesn't have to hide from S.H.I.E.L.D. You are a rescuer. Great, let's go. The experience of the past few days was a nightmare for Tony. It was the first time he was so close to death. He can still manage to escape in a difficult situation, but it would be even better if there are rescuers. After all, he himself is not very confident in the steel armor he is currently building. Do you need to destroy these? The middle-aged man named Ethan asked. Tony glanced back. There were still his manufacturing drawings and some semi-finished armors on the workbench. Just when he was hesitating, Frank's voice came from Cain's earphone. Cain, have you found Stark? The enemy's reinforcements are coming. I've found it, take him out immediately. Cain said to Tony and the others immediately after answering, there is no time, the enemy's reinforcements are coming soon, we must leave immediately. Okay, let's go. Anyway, the most important part of the whole suit of armor is on me. Tony made a decision immediately, and Cain nodded, protecting them and walking out of the cave. Frank, where are the reinforcements coming from? There are people from the 10 Rings around here. Cain was a little surprised. It's child soldiers, they come from their training base. Just now, someone from the plane found that someone was driving the child soldiers to this side. Hearing Frank say that, Cain immediately understood that the group of child soldiers who came to reinforce must have just been captured by the 10 Rings from nearby, and their combat effectiveness is not at all, but they can make Frank and the others be wary. Cain helped Tony to speed up his pace. Their mission was to rescue him. As long as they could evacuate early, they wouldn't have to face those poor child soldiers. Walking out of the cave, the gangsters of the 10 Rings gang were still fighting Frank and the others. Obviously, they also knew the news that the reinforcements were about to arrive, and the number of special forces was limited. Surrounded by anti-corpse explosion, Cain was annoyed at the unscrupulous tactics of the 10 Rings gang. As soon as he came out of the hole, a series of corpses exploded. The dead terrorists became his best weapon. The 10 Rings gang would never think that the bomb was by their side. This group of fools even had the habit of using corpses as their own shelters. Cain immediately avenged the dead guys. Some guys who shot while lying on the corpses were completely blown away. Kane's blow became the last straw that broke the camel's back. 10 Ring's defenses were in chaos. He came out easily, but Kane didn't notice that a red light flashed across his body to resist part of the shock wave of the corpse explosion. Of course, Frank and the others would not let go of this good opportunity. A wave of precise burst shots not only expanded the results of the battle, but also opened up a channel for Kane and the others. This way, under the protection of 4 special forces, Tony finally entered the crowd, and then began to retreat. When everyone disappeared on the ridge, the survivors of the 10 Rings gang slowly walked out of the bunker. The bald leader looked at the direction in which they disappeared, with a fierce look in his eyes. The rest of the journey was very smooth. The Special Forces team who went over the mountains avoided the reinforcements and returned to the helicopter. Without any hesitation, the plane immediately took off and headed back to the U.S. military base. Bullock had already sent back the news of Tony's rescue. A medical team is already waiting there. Ethan, why don't you come back to the United States with me? After being rewrapped by the ambulance personnel, Tony suggested to the savior. He already knew that all of Ethan's family members died in the war. Out of the heart of repayment, an invitation was sent to Ethan. Thank you, Tony, but it's not necessary. Although my family is gone, this is still my motherland. I want to use the skills I have learned to make life better for my compatriots, although there may be many difficulties, but I don't regret it. Besides, I have a new family now. Ethan smiled and led Zaire over from the side. On the way back, Ethan and Zaire, who had the same fate, quickly became acquainted, and Ethan decided to adopt him and raise him as his own child, and Zaire also regarded Ethan as his own. Treat him the same as his father. After all, he is an intellectual like his father and has a lot in common. And it wasn't just the two of them who stayed behind. Frank also suddenly decided not to return to the United States for the time being. Why, Frank, what are you doing here? Kane asked loudly. He couldn't understand Frank's temporary decision at all. For those child soldiers, if no one saves them, they will eventually become real 10 Ring gangsters and die on the battlefield. Frank said calmly. ... Kane was silent. He had no reason to stop Frank in this matter. Then I will stay too. Don't be silly, Kane. You still have friends in New York. Unlike me, there is only one person. Besides, do you think I can't do it without you? Don't forget that I punished you before I met you. The name of the gangster was typed out. Frank smiled and patted Kane on the shoulder. Also, the peace in New York City is only temporary. Those gangsters can't stand it for long. I hope one of us can continue to deter them there. This task is not easier than mine, but it is the most suitable task for you. Kane understood what he meant. The operations in Afghanistan were mainly concentrated in the wild, which required systematic training for a long time to get used to, and more time would be wasted in finding the opponent's base. This is not what Kane is good at. However, in the city, it is more suitable for him to constantly use killing to prevent crimes from happening. Okay. Kane finally nodded, but if there is anything you can't solve, you must remember to call me, and I will come to help you right away. Don't worry, I'm not as fragile as you think. Watching the shield plane disappear into the sky, Frank turned and left. He didn't give the full reason just now. More importantly, Frank thought he was not in New York. Nick Fury wanted to use friendship to drive Kane to do things. It's not that easy. Hey, buddy, that combat uniform of yours is really cool. Is it a new type of exoskeleton armor? Which company produced it? I have to say that Tony Stark is really a top-notch man. Turned up and down, walked to Kane and asked familiarly, also, is the grenade you used in the battle a new product? Why did I not see you throw it before it exploded? Kane, who had just parted ways with his friend, was really in no mood to chat with Tony, so he could only perfunctorily say, I built it myself, Rathmar Industries. Rathma Industries. I've never heard of it, but you are amazing, and this suit of armor has also given me a lot of inspiration. Tony didn't delve into this non-existent company, and he didn't remember many things. Especially when he doesn't care much about people or things. He has never remembered where he met his savior Ethan before, although Ethan told the time and place where they met. However, Tony's words caught Kane's attention, and he asked, Inspiration, are you planning to continue developing weapons when you go back? In Kane's impression, the catastrophe that Tony encountered was an opportunity for him to become Iron Man physically and mentally. Could it be that Iron Man died because they rescued him in advance? That would be a pity, although Tony Guy spends his days drinking and drinking, but he is still very reliable in big things, and as the smartest and richest superhero in the Marvel Universe, if he loses him, I really don't know what the Avengers will become. Kane's words also brought back memories of Tony. He couldn't help but think of the weapons of his own company that he had seen in the Ten Rings camp and beside the destroyed convoy, although he knew that even without their company's weapons, he was hijacked, but as long as he thought that he was killed by the weapon he invented, he would feel angry. No, I won't develop any more weapons, that's the key to open the gate of hell. Tony said loudly, staring at the empty seat opposite. Calm down, Tony. Seeing that Tony was agitated, Kane quickly sent a ray of spirit into his body to calm his mood by pacifying him. Sorry, what happened to me before made me a little aggressive. Tony waved his hand to stop the medical staff who were going to come forward for first aid. It's okay, you don't plan to study weapons anymore, so what about your company? Energy. Tony tapped the luminous body on his chest. In fact, I have been researching clean energy. This attack gave me a new idea in this regard. This kind of invention that can help the entire human race is what we are. That's where scientists should focus their energies, shouldn't they? Quote. Kane expressed silence on this. The history of mankind has proved one thing. No matter how noble the starting point is, any kind of invention may be used by mankind in war. However, this also stimulates the progress of human society. Can't talk about good or bad, then what did you mean by inspiration? Oh, it's your exoskeleton armor. Through this incident, I think it's time to invent a kind of protective equipment, similar to exoskeleton armor, to protect life. Of course, we can add some more functions to it, such as flight and suppression devices. Think about how time-consuming it is to get to the airport from home or work. If we can fly directly through the exoskeleton armor, it will save a lot of time. Use the time to help this world develop, and you don't have to worry about being attacked. Tony gestured and said, of course, he must have hidden a lot of things, but Kane can already know that he is getting closer to Iron Man. It should still be portable. If it's too bulky, you'll have to wear it to meetings or receptions. It doesn't seem very convenient. Kane thought about Tony in Iron Man 2. Suitcase-style armor, suggested. Well, your suggestion is very good. I should include this in the research content. This is very important, especially for busy people like you and me. Tony raised his eyebrows, and Kane's words gave him very inspiring. Well, Mr. Stark, I was joking just now. I am not a scientist of the Rothma industry. I am a priest, a Rothma priest, or you can call me a necromancer. Kane showed off to Tony. Well, that little lie just now wasn't worth pondering. Haha, well, your joke is really beyond my expectation, but you don't need to use such a clumsy lie to say that you don't plan to cooperate with me. I don't plan to buy your company or poach you to me. Come on, okay, I lied, I did want to poach you for a moment, but it shouldn't be, God. Seeing that Tony didn't believe his truth, Kane had to resort to some spells to increase his persuasiveness. Looking at Kane's completely white eyes and the breath of bones hovering around his body, Tony immediately chose to believe him. Magic. I thought it was just a thing used by medieval cults to deceive people. I didn't expect such a supernatural thing to exist. After a period of calm, Tony carefully observed the spell released by Kane. From a point of view, he looks like a scientist, full of curiosity and fearlessness about unknown things. Magic as an undiscovered science. I remember someone saying that. Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Kane laughed. He remembered that there are not a few magical powers in the Marvel world. A force native to the world, at least Doctor Strange would certainly agree with him. What you said also makes sense. Well, give me your contact information. Maybe magic can help me with the problems I encountered during the invention process, and another systematic science is likely to inspire me. Tony, the ability to accept new things is very strong, and he has even begun to use science to explain undead spells. What do you think about soul element particles? I heard that everyone will lose 35 grams of weight after death. Do you think that is it the weight of the soul? Until the plane landed in the United States, Tony did not stop discussing with Kane, which made him think that Tony and Peter should become good friends. Both of them are technological talents, and they are both poor enough. The cabin of the military aircraft opened slowly, and a beautiful woman in professional attire and a tall bodyguard came into everyone's eyes. Seeing Tony's hanging arm, the beautiful woman's eyes were immediately misted. "Tony, how are you?" The beauty ran over quickly to support Tony, and asked with concern. "Well, I'm craving a hamburger, and that's fine with Afghanistan. The flight attendants in the US military are terrible. They can't even find a hamburger on the plane. Okay, Pep, don't worry, I'm starving, let's go eat a cheeseburger. By the way, Kane, do you want to go together?" Tony thought of Kane, and immediately turned around and asked. "Forget it, I still have to report to work. When you have time, you can try my barbecue burger. I guarantee you will definitely fall in love with it." Kane smiled and waved goodbye to him. He didn't feel that Aegis the Bureau will let him go home so easily, and he still hasn't received the reward, so he won't leave if he is asked to leave. So, Frank chose to stay in Afghanistan. The New York branch of S.H.I.E.L.D. was still interviewed by Nick Fury. Tony's own industry in the United States is not surprising. The influence of big capitalists in the United States is no less than that of ordinary politicians. Yes, for the time being, the appearance of the child soldiers is a bit of a blow to him. Kane replied truthfully, "There is no need to hide this kind of thing, but I will take over his work." His job. Nick's head started to hurt a little again. Frank's so-called job is to cut off evil, but can that be called a job? It's obviously called murder, but he really has nothing to do with the young man opposite him. He is the guy who completed the hotel tragedy with Frank. How much price S.H.I.E.L.D. plans to pay to get him? And this guy was originally a dark superhero. If he was completely pushed to the evil forces because of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s arrest, who would bear the responsibility? Moreover, Nick Fury has already begun to plan a plan in his heart, and a hero like Kane who has seen blood is what he needs very much. Okay, remember to find out the identity of the other party before you kill, and don't hurt innocent people, or I will definitely arrest you. Nick Fury gave Kane a symbolic warning and gave up. The super-powered criminals and objects with weird energy staring at the whole world are a little overwhelmed. How can he have the energy to deal with superheroes? Then he picked up a bag of information from the table and handed it to Kane. "Hey, this is the identity information of your friend in the family. As for your criminal record, it is also gone. Be careful in the future and don't change it in front of the camera. Pretend you're not Spider-Man." This is the reward Nick Fury promised Kane for completing the task, and he took it with peace of mind. "Why, isn't there any cash reward? I paid bail for you." Nick Fury didn't want to see Kane again for a moment, and waved at him like chasing flies. Coulson has been sending Kane to his bar. Kane has a good feeling for him. Although he also acts in accordance with the rules of S.H.I.E.L.D., he is not as cold-blooded as Nick Fury. Could become director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Kane wouldn't mind being on good terms with him. As soon as I entered the bar, it was another surprise. Both Daredevil Matt and Spider-Man Peter were here. They were sitting on the bar and chatting while eating barbecue, while Morena was standing at the bar smiling and listening. They talked, and he just told Morena the news of his return, and it seemed that she had notified them. "Hey, guys, are you waiting for me?" Kane smiled and opened his arms and walked over. After returning from a long journey, the most pleasant thing is to get together with friends, especially after going through the events in Afghanistan. Although he is mentally strong enough, he also looks forward to the care of his friends. This guy is just here to eat." Matt hugged Kane and immediately betrayed Peter. "Hey, don't tell me about this." Peter also hugged Kane, and said embarrassedly, "I heard that you have a great burger here, so I came here to try it." Okay, I know. Hey Morena, give us a good young citizen a glass of beer. Since it's a welcome party, how can there be no wine? Okay. Morena skillfully picked up a glass of beer and put it in front of Peter. The female warrior who has been hanging out in the adventurer's bar all year round quickly became familiar with all kinds of business in the bar, except for the jukebox and the cash register. For a while, nothing else matters. "Oh, no, I'm still at work, so I can't drink." Peter looked at a large glass of beer and shook his head quickly. "Work? What are you doing now? Didn't you just become a New York hero a few days ago? Why are you so anxious to find a job? The bonus is too little." Matt also asked curiously. Although they are friends, they usually don't talk about their daily lives. In order to meet Kane, I am afraid they will not get together. Oh, don't mention that stuff. Dr. Connors originally wanted me to be his assistant, but he turned into Dr. Lizard himself. Osborn is still willing to hire me, but how can I do such a dangerous research? Maybe agree. As for the bonus you mentioned, it doesn't exist at all. The case of Dr. Connors is an emergency, and there is no arrest warrant at all. As for the bonus, the sheriff has already told me that it will be a reward if you don't arrest me. Depressed Peter didn't say anything else. The sheriff is still his future father-in-law. How dare he ask for money to work for his father-in-law? Fortunately, Dr. Connors' letter of recommendation is still useful. I used it to find a job as an assistant in another laboratory. Dr. Otto was very impressed with my interview. Today is my third day at work. There is only an experiment in the evening, so I can come to welcome you. Peter said proudly. Being able to work as an assistant in two top laboratories also reflected his ingenuity from the side. To the scientist with the best wall-climbing technology in the future. Kane raised his glass, and Matt raised his glass with a smile. Hey, can't you change the adjective? Boom, a glass of milk was placed in front of Peter, and Morena also raised the glass, and said with a smile, then pay respect to our milk-loving superheroes. You fools. Ha 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 ha. That night, Otto Laboratory, most of the top executives of the Osborn Group came here, including Norman Osborn, the big boss. They funded Dr. Otto's new energy research, and their purpose was to communicate with Otto the Tucker Group's arc reactor is contending. After all, the field of new alternative energy is a very big cake, and the Osborn Group has no intention of giving it up to its opponents. Dr. Otto is a stout man. He checked that the time was almost up, and he came to the crowd and said proudly, "Gentlemen and ladies, welcome to come. Today, you will witness the birth of a new energy source, Safe and sustainable energy that provides electricity to all and is cheaper than Stark Corp." Everyone in the Osborn Group smiled knowingly. This is the purpose of their investment, Dr. Otto continued. Next, I will wear my assistant to show you this new energy. Oh, forget for the introduction, my assistant is this, the intelligent robotic arm. Dr. Otto stepped aside, stopped in front of a strange shelf and turned around to take off his shirt. As he pressed a button, a row of centipede-like instruments stuck to his spine, and a row of thin needles it was inserted into his body. It seems that he often used this device, and just frowned slightly and survived. Gala gala, Dr. Otto did not see any action. The 4 steel supports inserted into the ground squirmed like spirit snakes. Only then did everyone realize that they were not supports at all, but 4 octopus-like tentacles. Same mechanical arm. Seeing the directors retreating again and again, Dr. Otto smiled and explained, these 4 robotic arms are designed to handle nuclear fusion. Precision work, but don't worry, it's connected directly to the nerves in my spine and in turn to the brain, so absolutely no programming glitches. Good design. Only Norman Osborn on the board of directors did not retreat, but looked at the 4 mechanical arms with interest. Thank you, Mr. Osborn. Well, don't waste everyone's time, let us witness this epic-making moment now. Dr. Otto turned around and activated a huge instrument, and injected a rare element, put it in. As the instrument was activated, countless lasers irradiated the spherical element, causing it to expand immediately. In an instant, it expanded dozens of times, and radiated dazzling light outward like a sun. Successful, I succeeded, look at that, this light represents the future. Dr. Otto was ecstatic at this scene, and the senior management of the Osborn Group also showed joy, but Peter, who was the experimental assistant, discovered something is wrong. The energy release speed of this energy core seems to be much faster than expected. After 8 o'clock in the evening, it was the best time of the day for the Kane bar. Because of his presence, the security situation in the nearby neighborhood was unbelievably good, and no fool would come near this area. Because that often means death or disappearance. Gradually, the surrounding residents have also discovered this. After a busy day, they are gradually used to coming to the bar for a drink, bragging and farting with old friends, and of course, coming here to settle a dinner. It's also a good choice. Although the boss here is a young man, Kane roared. You are the young man, your whole family is young man. But the bartending skills are quite good, and the barbecue of their beautiful chef is also very good. One hand is a famous delicacy around here. The jukebox in the bar is playing soothing jazz music, and Kane's hand is flying up and down with the music, and the shaker in his hand is also bouncing up and down as if glued to his hand. The metal body of the pot reflects the light of the bar, as if a dancing elf. Wow! The shaker stopped, unscrewed the lid, a stream of beautiful sapphire-like liquid flowed into a transparent goblet. Kane gently sent the glass to a blonde girl with 2 fingers, and smiled slightly. "You Blue Friday, I hope you like it." "Thank you." The girl smiled charmingly, scratched Kane's palm when she took the wine glass, and stuffed a rolled-up dollar bill into his hand. "Thank you." Kane skillfully put $20 into the cash box behind the counter, and then stuffed a small note with a phone number inside it into a wastebasket that was almost full. All these little notes. As a large amount of spirit tempers the body, Kane's physical function is getting better and better, which also makes his bartending technique so unique, attracting a lot of young girls, but Kane will not respond to them at present. Anyone is enough. He is still slowly adapting to this world. After all, he is not a native Marvel human. Of course, the more important point is that he has a sense of crisis in his heart, not only because he needs to get a lot of spirits as soon as possible, raise your rank to use the power of Rothma to return to your own world, and the supervillains in the Marvel world, God knows who will come to you first and take the lives of yourself or the people around you. Frank's pain he can't bear, don't want to experience it once. "Hi, Kane, I also want to have a glass of the cocktail that girl asked for just now, and take the rest as your tip." Another black-haired girl came to Kane and handed over a $100 bill. Okay, look at Kane looking at this girl's brand name clothes. He wondered if she thought of herself as a part-time cowherd. Okay, please wait a moment. Kane still accepted the banknote with the idea of not making money for nothing. Anyway, he was only selling his art and not his body, and he was not afraid of being raped by that girl. However, just as he took when the shaker was started, the whole bar was suddenly plunged into darkness. "Ah!" the girls exclaimed. Kane hurriedly said loudly, "It's a power outage, don't panic, Morena, help light some candles, it's in the cabinet." A few antique candlesticks were placed, bringing a glimmer of light to the bar and calming everyone down. Some familiar old customers simply continued to drink by the light of the candles, and joked, "Hey, Kane, you forget to pay the electricity bill?" In my opinion, it was our little Kane who rejected a girl. She cut off the power supply of the bar because of love and hatred, ha 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 ha. Of course Kane knew that none of this was true, but he was even more worried that some supervillain had appeared, so after greeting Morena, he left the bar alone. A few steps up the ladder to the roof. Sure enough, it was a citywide power outage. Except for some important buildings that could supply their own power, the whole of New York was plunged into darkness. Sirens on the streets in the distance were blaring loudly. Something must have happened. Such a bad environment is too suitable for crimes. I am afraid that even some guys who usually dare not commit crimes will take advantage of the darkness to do some illegal things. The bone armor immediately covered Kane's body, and he jumped to the side. The roof of the building and ran towards the place where the sirens sounded. At the same time, he also asked Morena in his heart to protect the customers in the bar. It didn't take long for a man in a red tights to run beside him. It was Daredevil Matt. "Hey, Kane, do you know what happened?" "No, I just came out of the bar too. This citywide blackout must not be a trivial matter. I hope there won't be any supervillains." "Well, you're right, but the top priority now is to stop ordinary criminals. I'll go this way and you go there, let's split up." "Okay, be careful." "Ah, you too." The two separated on a roof, and each ran in different directions. However, the two of them didn't notice that 100 meters away, there was a sudden twist on the empty roof, followed by 2 short masked people. A person appeared here out of nowhere. The two of them whispered a few words, and separated, one by one followed the backs of Kane and Matt, and their figures gradually disappeared while running in the air. At this moment, Otto's laboratory located on the bank of the West River is in a mess. It seems that there has been a big explosion here, and most of the laboratory has disappeared. Dr. Otto looked at the sky blankly through the ruins. The moon kept muttering, "How could this be? How could this be? My calculations can't be wrong. Why did the explosion happen?" The source of the power outage in New York City tonight is here. At the beginning, the experiment went very smoothly, and the surging energy was continuously released from that instrument. However, as time went by, the situation changed, and the energy transmission became more and more intense. Large, even created a magnetic field around the machine, which began to attract all the surrounding metal to the center. Peter loudly reminded Dr. Otto to turn off the power, but the doctor, who was eager for quick success, refused to do anything. Peter had no choice but to run out of the room and put on a spider suit, and save everyone before the situation deteriorated to the extreme. Out of control, the out-of-control instrument eventually exploded, knocking out the entire New York power grid before blowing up half of the lab, killing an electrical engineer named Max. Dr. Otto muttered in dismay. He knew he was doomed. This project cost a lot of money, but the end result was like this. The destruction of the laboratory is a trivial matter. The key is that almost all the equations have to be recalculated. The problem is, Osborn, will the group have the patience to support his project? Doctor, are you okay? A gentle voice sounded, and Dr. Otto turned his head to look, and found that Norman Osborn had come to his side, holding his shoulder kindly. Mr. Osborn, I'm sorry, this may be a small technical mistake. Give me a little time. Next time I will be able to succeed. Oh, don't worry, Doctor, I believe you. It was just a small problem just now, and the experiment failed because of that nosy Spider-Man. Don't worry, when your body fully recovers, we can do it again. Start the experiment. No one noticed that Norman Osborn was holding a small bottle of green medicine between his fingers, which was being injected into Dr. Otto's body. Yeah, Spider-Man, without him, my experiment would be successful. A green light flashed in Dr. Otto's eyes, and the mechanical arm that was deeply implanted in his body due to the explosion also began to slowly move. Wriggled up. So, you're unemployed again. Kane couldn't help but laugh. Peter came to the bar early in the morning in a decadent mood, drinking glasses of wine. After gulping down a big gulp, Peter wiped his mouth and said with a wry smile, "Yeah, after working for a few days, I lost my job again without even paying my weekly salary. This time it's even more unlucky. I don't even have a letter of introduction." It's not just about the letter of introduction. If you go to a laboratory and pour another laboratory, are you sure there are laboratories that dare to use you? Kane handed him a plate of potato wedges to fill his stomach, and then drank like this. Even if he was a spider, he would probably be drunk. Yeah, probably no laboratory would dare to take me. However, since Uncle Ben's death, the family's situation has gotten worse and worse. Aunt May's financial resources are not many, so I have to continue looking for a job. Then what can you do? Some newspapers need close-up photos of superheroes on the cover. I think I can start from this aspect. I have sent a few photos of myself before, and I can earn some income. After speaking, Peter seemed to think of something. He looked at Kane with hot eyes. Don't think about it. I won't be a model for you. You'd better ask Matt. Kane expressed that he is not interested in this way of becoming famous. Who knows what those news media that only want to attract people's attention will say. He remembered that even a hero like Spider-Man could be hacked by the Daily Bugle, let alone him. Hey, I asked a long time ago, but he refused, and his characteristics are too obvious. Taking his photo will easily reveal his true identity. Kane grinned. You fool, really thought about it that way? Kane thought about it, and for the sake of the privacy of other superheroes, he should help Peter, the unlucky fool, or, I'll find you a job. Oh, which large laboratory do you know? No, come help me, I still need a handyman. Hey man, no kidding like that. I'm not kidding, Peter, think about it. Will newspapers report superheroes on the front page every day? If it's not on the front page, who will buy the photos in your hand? And once there are too many photos, they will be worthless. How much did you sell for your first Spider-Man photo, and how much is it now? Peter stopped talking. He had to admit that what Kane said made sense. The first photo he accidentally took, the Daily Bugle spent a full $300 to get the world's first close-up high-definition shot of Spider-Man photos, but as Spider-Man appears more and more frequently, the price of photos keeps dropping. Recently, unless he waits for the front-page photo to be published, the stingy boss of the Daily Bugle will pay $80 to buy one from him. This is obviously not a long-term job. Okay, then how much are you going to pay me? Wage $400 a week, work 8 hours a day, no commission for tips. Wow, really? To be honest, Kane's price is not low, especially if the tips are not included. If Peter does a good job, his weekly salary will more than double. Well, How should I thank you? Peter was not stupid, and soon he understood that Kane was helping him. Although Manhattan is the place with the highest salary in the world, this definitely does not include Hell's Kitchen. It's not a famous restaurant, and it's not on a bustling street. It only depends on the surrounding residents for consumption. The turnover here is not very high. Come on, this money is not for free. Besides, if someone knows that $400 can hire Spider-Man as a security guard, I don't know how many people will rush to pay for it. Hey, didn't you agree to do odd jobs? How come there is still a job as a security guard? There are only 3 people here. Do you plan to let the boss or the cook do the security? Besides, doing odd jobs means doing everything. It's good if you don't let you catch flies. Oh, yes, you have to be responsible for catching flies in summer too. After all, we do catering, hygiene is the first priority. Roll. Peter started his new job that night, and the diners nearby welcomed this handsome boy. Soon, Peter discovered the benefits of this job, not referring to the high tip, but the long-lost feeling at ease. As a superhero, Peter no longer has to hide anything. In his spare time, he can even discuss with Kane how to deal with different gangsters. Although sometimes their opinions are somewhat different, but this kind of discussion was of great help to Peter's actions. At least he learned to protect the surrounding civilians when arresting the gangsters, so as to avoid some hostage-taking incidents. Aunt May also came to visit Peter's working environment a few days later, and she greatly appreciated the bar and Kane. After being in contact with the society for a long time, the old lady knows how precious such a friend and such a job are. Before she left, he told Peter to work hard and not let this friend down. Peter quickly agreed, and after obtaining the consent of Kane and Aunt May, he even rented a room above the bar to bring all his luggage. This time, he didn't have to worry about his spider suit being discovered by his aunt. He also moved with him all kinds of equipment, manufacturing and repairing equipment for spider silk launchers, police FM interceptors, etc. I have to say that Peter is really a smart guy, and he can be regarded as a proper version in terms of invention and creation. Tony Stark, of course, after the mutation, his talents were a bit blind, and he could only be reduced to a melee auxiliary tank in the end, but it complemented his natural taunting skills. Sorry, Dr. Otto, although I really want to help you, but this time the loss is indeed a bit big. The board of directors is still discussing the feasibility of your energy experiment, although I will definitely help you argue, but I'm afraid it will take a while. Of course, if you can attract some investment, my chances of persuading the board of directors will be greatly improved. Norman Osborn's voice came out of the microphone. Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Osborn, I can understand your difficulties. Don't worry, I still have some friends. I will persuade them to invest in this project as soon as possible, and you will get good news soon now. I won't bother you. Goodbye, Mr. Osborn. Standing in the ruins of the laboratory, Dr. Otto hung up the phone and muttered to himself, where can I find an investment? He was just trying to appease Norman Osborn. In fact, he didn't know any rich friends. If Peter was here now, I am afraid that Dr. Otto might not be able to recognize him. His slightly bloated figure, due to staying in the laboratory all year round, has turned into a lean muscle. If you look carefully, his exposed skin, there seem to be some horny protrusions on the body, and even reflect a cold light under the moonlight. Dr. Otto, who was walking around the ruins at random, seemed to see something out of the corner of his eye. He turned his head, and saw a huge neon signboard of the Commonwealth Bank flickering on the other side of the river. Looking at this signboard, Dr. Otto, there was a weird smile on the corner of his mouth. Chapter 31. It was late at night, and all the guests in the bar left this warm and cozy place and returned to their homes. The feeling of being slightly drunk would give them a good dream, while Kane and Peter began to pack up the bar. All the tables and chairs are wiped down to make a good impression on tomorrow's customers. Hey, Kane, I don't quite understand why you, Matt, and Frank are so ruthless in their shots. Wouldn't it be good to be a good neighbor to the citizens like me? You can become an idol and role model for children, and let society it's even better. Peter asked curiously while mopping the floor. This question had been in his mind for a long time, and he didn't think he could ask it until he became friends with Kane. Kane smiled, put a wooden stool on the table and looked at Peter and said, "That's a good question. In fact, I thought about it too. Haven't you noticed the biggest difference between us? Different. What do you mean? In terms of abilities, look at your abilities. You can walk on buildings like flat ground, move at high speed in the city with the help of spider silk, and you also have super strength, agility, and induction. These abilities allow you to help people in various ways, thus make them feel like you're approachable, like a boy next door, only with a little more skill. You also have some of these abilities. Peter said he didn't quite understand. Yes, we also have some abilities, but we all only have certain abilities. For example, if a building is on fire, you can enter it and rescue everyone, and what we can do, probably only Frank can use it. Explosives make the building fall faster. Let's say, there's a patient on the side of the road who needs emergency treatment, and the road starts to get stuck in traffic. You can take him to the hospital by air, but what about us? I'm afraid I can only bring his soul back to the hospital. Become a flesh and blood puppet on the corpse. As for Matt, no matter what amazing actions a blind man makes, he will be dragged to the laboratory for sliced research. Oh, what you said is disgusting, but it does have some truth, but the attack is so fierce, can't you give those criminals a chance to repent? Why do you have to kill people? How do you explain this? Peter, I can only say that this is a matter of growing up. Frank was a soldier. He spent the first half of his life on the battlefield. When his wife and children were brutally killed by gangsters, the law could not punish the murderer. He's going to be the punisher by the time he's gone. As for Matt and I, we both grew up in Hell's Kitchen and we've been used to the ugliness of the world since we were kids. Some of us in Queens, you can't even imagine that good is rewarded with good and evil is rewarded with evil. It is not necessarily correct. Innocent people die violently, while vicious criminals get away with it. These things happen every day. The people we kill bear countless blood debts. How many people would continue to suffer if they were kept alive? But what's the difference between you who abused lynching and them? Well, after a full circle, Kane really didn't know what to say. Attention all police officers. Attention all police officers. A robbery occurred at the Federal Bank on 15 Riverside Avenue, suspected to be a super criminal. Please the nearby police officers to go for reinforcements. Please ask the nearby police officers to go for reinforcements. The police call stopped the communication between the two in time. Kane and Peter glanced at each other, shook with a smile, took off their coats and ran out the door. Morena also dropped her apron and followed closely behind. Rear. Federal Bank at No. 15 Riverside Avenue. A big hole has been broken in the exterior wall of this historic building. A circle of police cars with flashing police lights surrounded the bank, and all the policemen pointed their guns at the big hole in the wall. The police helicopter in the sky also used its searchlights to shoot the bank back and forth. This can't be blamed for the timidity of the New York police. No one who sees the big iron door of the vault on the wall opposite the bank will have the urge to attack immediately. The security guard who rescued from the bank told them a long time ago, enter the guy in the vault as a monster, with 4 octopus-like iron hands growing on his back, which can forcefully remove the vault door from the wall and throw it out. After the incident of Dr. Lizard last time, the New York police fully understood that super criminals should be confronted by superheroes. In addition to considering the safety of their subordinates, it also involves the possibility of a substantial increase in the amount of insurance for the police officers. The commander at the scene even started to mutter why Spider-Man hadn't come yet. Sir, he's here. The commander finally heard the good news from the headset. As a police helicopter on the river sank slightly, a red and blue figure swung across the wide river with the help of the helicopter, turning over a somersault landed on the roof of the bank, and the policeman who saw him clearly cheered. The long-awaited Spider-Man finally arrived. In comparison, Kane and Morena are much more miserable. They can only drive around the bridge across the river. Kane, who looks depressed, has already begun to think about how to control Tony's need for several sets of steel suits. Not much, just fly. Drive Otto. Peter, who had already entered the bank, recognized the scientist who was working with him a few days ago through the 4 robotic arms, but the very different appearances of the two made him doubt his own judgment. All the fat on Dr. Otto's body disappeared, and the wrinkles on his face no longer existed, but instead he had gray-black rock-like rough skin and raised muscles. Oh, do you know me? From science magazines, I can't imagine that Spider-Man is still a science lover. So, what are you here for? Do you want a piece of the pie? I'm a generous person. Now, go on. The cash box flew towards Peter's face, and Dr. Otto grinned at the same time, and he didn't care about the saliva flowing from his mouth. It seemed that there was something wrong with his mind. It was hard to imagine that he had ever as a refined scientist. Peter caught the cash box thrown by Dr. Otto and put it aside, trying to use words to dissuade him from giving up the crime, but he didn't expect that it was just a cover. Before he could open his mouth, he was caught by a mechanical arm coming from the side. It flew out. "Aha, Spider-Man, I remember you. You were the one who ruined everything for me in the lab, and now you are here to stop me from raising money. Well, it seems that I have to teach you a lesson. How about a spider specimen sample?" Dr. Otto threw away the cash box in his hand and rushed towards Peter as if he had discovered something interesting. The 4 retractable mechanical arms allowed him to ignore any obstacles like Peter. Clap! 2 white balls flew out of the table and chair that Peter knocked over, and hit Dr. Otto's cheek accurately. These 2 golf ball-sized white balls came from Peter's spider web launcher. The launcher can make the spider silk fly hundreds of meters away. The power contained in these 2 small balls is definitely not worse than the high-speed serve of a professional tennis player. Anyway, the general gangster will be knocked out if he hits one of them. Peter had calculated well at first. Dr. Otto's mechanical arm is really powerful, but he is just an ordinary person. As long as he is knocked out, the matter will be over. But this time, Peter miscalculated and got hit twice. The old Dr. Otto just raised his head and he was fine. There was no redness or swelling on the gray-black skin. "Hey, Spider-Man, are you a child playing a snowball fight? Let me take you back to your mother's arms. This world is too dangerous for you." Peter was immediately under siege. Boom! The loud noise from the bank made the sheriff rejoice that he didn't rashly send his subordinates directly in. To be honest, it's not easy for him to sit in this position. Super criminals appear in New York City from time to time, which makes policemen like them always it is to face these monsters, and as a violent organization, their combat effectiveness is the weakest among all departments. It seems that they can't do anything except evacuate the people every time, and they are mostly condemned every time. This is really not the case. What people do. "Sheriff, Sheriff." Just as the sheriff felt sorry for himself, a call came from the headset. "What's the matter?" said the sheriff impatiently. "Death Whisperer and a lady want to come in. Can you let them pass?" "Nonsense. Are you a pig brain? You still need to ask for instructions. Let them in quickly." The sheriff shouted loudly, and this group of subordinates didn't let him worry. Of course, the more free combat power of superheroes, the better, and even intercepted them. If it wasn't for their contact information, the sheriff would even be willing to notify them to act together every mission. As for being ridiculed by the media, he had to be alive to see it. He is not stupid. Kane's car drove directly to the gate of the bank without any problems. As soon as he got out of the car, the sheriff came over to shake hands with him and said, "Mister, but no good news yet." "What are the super criminals in there capable of?" Kane asked, and since the police didn't seem to have any ill feelings for them, he didn't mind getting more information from them. The currently known ability is the 4 mechanical arms, which are infinitely powerful and can directly destroy the door of the vault. The sheriff pointed to the big iron door on the wall. "Okay, thank you, Sheriff, take someone out of the way, so you don't get accidentally hurt." It seems that it is Dr. Octopus. Kane has already understood it, and he rushed into the bank with Morena after giving the sheriff a word. Seeing Kane and the others go in, the sheriff immediately obediently ordered the encirclement to be expanded a little more. He understands the reason for being persuaded to eat enough. As soon as they entered the gate of the bank, Kane and the others saw Peter flying past them like a cannonball again. This scene was so familiar, as if it happened when they were dealing with Dr. Lizard. Seeing the addition of new enemies, Dr. Octopus was vigilant and did not continue to shoot, which also gave Kane time to taunt Peter. "Wow, Spider-Man, even if you are agile, you don't have to go back and forth to be beaten flying around." "Yes. Stop talking nonsense." Peter endured the pain and got up from the smashed desk and chair to remind him, "Be careful, he is much more powerful than Dr. Lizard." "Yeah, I don't think so." Kane curled his lips, turned around and opened his palm to Dr. Octopus, aging. Kane has fully realized the magical effect of the curse in these few battles. This spell that directly acts on the flesh of the creature can greatly reduce the movement ability of the creature. Even a body-enhanced type like Dr. Lizard will be affected. It's just that the effect is slightly worse, and Dr. Octopus's own athletic ability is very poor in his impression. After being cursed by aging, he may not even be able to move his fingers. Boom. Well, Kane is still a little young after all, and he is too confident in his abilities. Dr. Octopus's 4 mechanical arms are not driven by muscles. He was pumped by an angry Dr. Octopus with a mechanical arm just after he released the curse. Flew. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 bursting arrows stopped Dr. Octopus from pursuing. Fortunately, Morena was not careless, but calmly looked for the enemy's weakness. Ha ha ha, Death Whisperer, it seems that you are no better than me. Peter laughed exaggeratedly. He was relieved, but he still kept a trace of calmness and did not call out Kane directly. Name to come. Shut up. Kane got up in embarrassment. Although Dr. Octopus is not good at energy research, he is very good at mechanical design. The bone armor on his chest has been broken, which fully shows that the strength of the mechanical arm is limited. How big? Blood Crow, attack his body, that's his weakness. Kane shouted loudly, but it seemed that Morena knew this better than him. The 3 bone arrows flew past again, but they were still blocked by the mechanical arm. Dr. Octopus's mechanical arm is used to control nuclear fusion with bare hands, which can effectively prevent the influence of temperature on the mechanical arm. At the same time, the strong alloy is not afraid bullets or explosions, plus the artificial intelligence chip and camera installed by the doctor in each robotic arm, means that he has 5 brains and 6 eyes participating in offense and defense at the same time. No matter how fast Morena's arrow is, as long as the robotic arm it's okay to block Dr. Octopus's body, and he can even use 2 arms to fight back. Spider-Man, Blood Crow and I are restrained, you go attack his body. Seeing this, Kane also threw out the bone spear. A large number of long-range attacks forced Dr. Octopus to stand on the ground with his own legs, and use 4 mechanical arm defense. You must know that he could beat Spider-Man with 2 mechanical arms just now. Okay. Peter agreed, and immediately swung across the roof. With the restraint of Kane and Morena, Dr. Octopus had no time to care about Spider-Man who fell from the sky, allowing him to easily bully the doctor. Hey, Dr. Otto, stop, before you cause too much damage. You can get a reduced sentence if you surrender now. Peter tied the body of Dr. Octopus firmly with a spider web, and hung upside down in front of him to persuade him. Surrender is a good idea. Dr. Otto seemed to be really considering Spider-Man's suggestion, and he lowered his head to think. Right, you just lost your way for a while. As long as you sincerely admit your mistakes and serve your sentence, I believe you will be able to get out of prison and start your life again in a short time. Spider-Man said to himself, but he didn't notice the abnormality on Dr. Otto's body shape. Dr. Otto's muscles wrapped in spider silk began to bulge gradually, and a violent energy was released from his blood. Be careful. This energy gave Kane a familiar feeling, while Morena shouted with a changed face. Before Peter understood what was going on, Dr. Otto had already wrestled free from the spider's thread and sent him flying with a punch. Poor Peter was face to face with him just now, and the punch just hit him on his face. He fainted for a while. What is that? Kane asked while throwing the bone spear at Dr. Octopus. The devil's breath of hell. I was corrupted by this thing in the first place. Morena showed a serious expression on her face. The corruption from hell is not so easy to solve. Demon. Kane frowned. In his impression, Mephisto was the only guy in Marvel's movie world who could be called a demon. After he came to this world, he was once worried about the trouble that Ghost Rider would come to him. But fortunately, Ghost Rider doesn't seem to have appeared yet. At least he asked Frank and the others, and they all said that they had never heard of this name. But now it's different. He found the breath of hell in Dr. Octopus. He didn't remember any mention of this in any movie, which made him a little worried. However, it is useless to think too much. The first thing to solve now is the big problem with 6 arms. Just as Kane was thinking for a while, Peter and Morena threw themselves into the fight with Dr. Octopus again. It's not so much fighting as it is barely parrying. Each of Dr. Octopus's mechanical arms is as strong and flexible as a python. Morena, who is a long-range sniper, is okay, and Peter, who is more inclined to melee combat, is just like a ball. Hiding everywhere. Originally, Dr. Octopus had a great weakness, which was his body. This was also an important reason why Peter was able to suppress him in comics and movies, but it is different now. Body has been improved by more than one level, at least Peter's fists can't do anything about him. Cain didn't make a rash move. He had tested it himself just now. Although the bone armor's sturdiness was not bad, it couldn't be hit continuously by the mechanical arm. As for agility, he couldn't surpass Peter either. Dr. Octopus started to fight, and once again used two robotic arms to grab the buildings around the bank hall and chased after Peter. After being corrupted, he seemed to have a bad brain, and his hatred for Peter was extremely deep. However, this is also convenient for Cain. After all, he considers himself a standard legal system output, and it is more suitable for Peter to do the job of pulling monsters. Morena, did you see that guy's mechanical arm supporting his body? Let him fall. After observing, Cain finally came up with a plan. No, I tried, my attack is not powerful enough to penetrate his mechanical arm. It's okay, Morena, you can attack where he is holding, and leave the rest to me. Cain smiled at her, and then his eyes glowed with white light, and two clusters of pale energy gathered in his hands. Command the puppet. Following Cain's spell, two balls of white light were injected into Morena's body by him. This is a spell that Rothma studied before the third battle against demons. Its main purpose is to strengthen the puppets of the priests of Sema. In the second battle against demons, the priests who were proficient in summoning puppets did not perform well on the battlefield of the demon world, mainly because the puppet's strength was fixed from birth and could not follow the caster. However, these puppets were vulnerable to demons at the devil level, which led to the loss of many priests of Rothma. In view of this, Rothma adjusted some details of the puppet summoning technique. Although the number of puppets of priests of Rothma is limited, their strength can be improved with the improvement of the summoner. On this basis, Rothma also studied the upgraded version of the puppet summoning spell, commanding the puppet. This spell allows the priests to inject a large amount of spirit into the puppet's body, allowing them to release attacks that far exceed their current capabilities. At this moment, Cain released this spell, and the eyes of the spirit-infused Morena began to turn white, and there was a white flame burning on her body. She calmly looked in the direction of Dr. Octopus and pulled the bone bow away. Two bone arrows appeared on the bowstring out of thin air. Unlike before, there was also a layer of white flame attached to the bone arrows. Whoosh! Morena let go of her hand suddenly, and two arrows appeared in front of Dr. Octopus's mechanical arm in an instant. The bone arrow did not touch the mechanical arm, but sank into the building that the mechanical arm was holding. Boom! Boom! Two bursts of explosions sounded at the same time. Not only shattered Dr. Octopus' support point, but the shock wave also caused him to fall heavily to the ground before he could react in time. Peter. Cain no longer cared about exposing Peter's identity, and called him loudly. Peter also understood. Ignoring the pain in his body, sprayed out a lot of spider silk from his hands, and tied the four mechanical arms of Dr. Octopus tightly together. Hurry up, I won't last long, Peter shouted while continuing to wrap around the spider silk. He knew the power of Dr. Octopus's mechanical arm, and the spider silk wouldn't last long. Blood ran. Cain cast the spell again, and he came to Dr. Octopus in an instant. Roar! Dr. Octopus also tried to attack Cain, but he punched him in the head. Bone prison. The white bones rising from the ground firmly stuck the doctor's joints, making him unable to break free for a while, and then Cain stretched out his palm and pressed the doctor's face. Soul Siphon, a variant spell of Life Siphon, is a spell specifically aimed at the demons and angels in the sanctuary world. These two races like to impose their will on the humans in the sanctuary the most. The techniques are similar, except that one is called descending and the other is called corruption. They all imprint a brand on the human soul, allowing him to slowly transform into a vassal warrior or slave warrior on both sides. The soul siphon is to forcibly strip the soul imprints of these two races from the human soul. This powerful spell can only be cast by Rothma priests who practice the way of balance. Of course, this also brought them to heaven. Bear grudges with hell at the same time. Now Cain is releasing this spell. He holds a bone dagger in his hand, and the white flame is transmitted from his palm to the doctor's face. When the flame completely surrounds his head, it begins to flow back again. Following in the backflow of the flame, a green substance was also mixed in it. Ah! A heart-wrenching scream came from the doctor's mouth. Stripping off the imprint of the soul is not a comfortable thing. Few people can bear the pain from the soul. As the last trace of green matter was absorbed back into Kane's palm along with the white flame, Dr. Otto finally stopped screaming and passed out. Is that all right? Peter came to Kane and asked. There is no problem with the soul. Kane looked at the still strong doctor on the ground with some concern, but his body has also been transformed by the breath of hell, which is very suitable for the corruption of demons. If there are any demons' remnants, the first one to be corrupted is still him. Is there no other way but to kill him? Peter asked with a frown. I'm also very troubled. He doesn't have any vengeful spirits on him. Although he has been corrupted, he hasn't killed a single person. Kane is also a little worried. If he kills people just because of the possibility of corruption, he really can't do it, because Dr. Otto himself is not a heinous person. Maybe isolating him from the world so that he cannot touch the power of demons can solve this problem. Kane thought for a while and said, "Oh, that's simple, robbing a bank is also a felony, just throw him in jail." Peter said quickly, he hoped not to kill anyone. Then what about this thing? Which prison can withstand a blow from this thing? Kane asked, pointing to the mechanical arms on the ground. Let's dismantle it, Peter said while helping Dr. Otto. He had worked in Dr. Otto's laboratory and knew the principle of this set of robotic arms. However, when he opened Dr. S. clothes and saw when he got to his back, he was depressed. The suppressor and release switch of the robotic arm were destroyed. It may be caused by the failure of the nuclear fusion experiment that night. This robotic arm is directly connected to the doctor's bone marrow and brainstem. If forcibly stripping him will turn him into a vegetable, it would be better to kill him. Leave it to us. Just when Peter was at a loss, a voice came from the door. Agent Coulson, why are you here? Kane recognized the man walking in through the gate at a glance. It was Phil Coulson, the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. in New York. You can just call me Phil. Coulson smiled at Kane and said, we were originally responsible for super crimes, but there were other things that delayed us today, so we came a little late. Kane rolled his eyes. Who knows if you have been hiding by the side, waiting for the dust to settle here before finishing it. By the way, we have a special prison, which happens to be used to detain these super criminals. Give him to us, Phil said to Kane and the others. This is not a bad idea. Although it is not ruled out that S.H.I.E.L.D. will conduct some scientific research on these super criminals, they are indeed the most professional candidates to deal with these super criminals. Since you do not want to kill Dr. Otto, then hand him over to giving it to S.H.I.E.L.D. is also a good way, but it can't be handed over to them for nothing, or it will become a habit for them in the future. Wouldn't they come out after the fight every time? Phil, what about rewards? We can't work for you for nothing. Kane said. He dared to ask Nick Fury for a reward directly, let alone Phil. Reward? Well, Kane is the first superhero who dares to ask S.H.I.E.L.D. The department's capital expenditure is strictly controlled, and there is no additional expenditure for the establishment of an incentive fund, so I am afraid there is no way to reward you in terms of funds. You don't need money. Kane readily accepted Phil's excuse, which made him feel ominous. However, you owe me a favor, how about it? Kane's words made Phil unable to calm down. Favor debt is the most uncomfortable thing. What kind of favor is owed? How big is it? How to pay it back? There are too many tricks in it. Mr. Joe, you know, in my capacity, if you have any excessive demands, I can't agree to them, so this kind of promise is useless. Phil said frankly, he always treats superheroes. I think it's better to be honest. How about without harming the interests of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all mankind? Kane didn't seem to give up. Phil Coulson thought about it again, but still shook his head. I'm sorry, Mr. Joe, I'm afraid I still can't agree to this unconfirmed request. Well, unfortunately, I thought Nick Fury was the only guy in S.H.I.E.L.D. who liked to use free labor. I didn't expect his subordinates to be like this too. Kane curled his lips and walked away from Dr. Octopus. Rena and Peter naturally followed. After all, Phil was an honest person, and said with a guilty face, sorry, Mr. Joe, we will get there as soon as possible next time. Kane waved his hand and left without looking back. On the way home, Peter couldn't help comforting Kane. Government agencies are like this. We just want to protect ordinary people from harm, so don't worry about rewards. Kane smiled and did not reply. In fact, his goal has been achieved, which is to make Phil feel guilty. The difference between humans and robots is that humans have feelings. Even the most vicious serial killer must have a piece of heart. The weak place, let alone someone like Phil, who is different from Nick Fury, who has lived for an unknown amount of time. Phil is an honest man, and when he feels guilty towards someone in his heart, he will definitely feel guilty in some way. It is enough to treat him differently from other people in matters. Although I don't know where this trick will be used, it will definitely not lose money. Unlike the simple Peter, Kane has some insights after the trip to Afghanistan. It is not necessarily his combat ability that determines the influence of a hero. His status and importance in human society may be more important. How powerful is Tony Stark? Of course, his ingenuity is one of the best in the Marvel world, but is he really so irreplaceable? The old Ant-Man Pym Hank, the Hulk before his transformation, and even Maya, the inventor of the extremis virus. He is absolutely no worse than him in some fields, but one of the leaders of the Ultimate Avengers is Tony Stark. Kane thought about it seriously. Maybe this has an inseparable relationship with him owning a huge business empire and new energy technologies that can affect human society. This is a real society, not a simple superhero movie, an energy business. It is self-evident what the empire represents in a capitalist country like the United States, and the interests of countless politicians or the military are closely linked with it. When Tony had an accident, S.H.I.E.L.D. immediately tried every means to rescue him. Before that, they didn't know that Tony would become Iron Man, so it could only be that Tony's own value was worth them. And where is the value of Tony? As Nick Fury said, it is only because his father is the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nonsense, Peggy Carter is also the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D., but look at the result of her niece. He is just an ordinary agent who seduced Captain America, so his real value is definitely not the son of Howard Stark, but the successor of the Stark Group. And even Tony's father, Howard Stark, is not a good man and a believer. As the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D., he is very aware of the true face of the government. Think about what he left for his son, a new upgraded version of the arc reactor and the new elements that match it. Why he passed such a good thing to Tony in such a covert way. I believe it is definitely not because he is afraid of being mastered by Hydra. After all, at that time he thought that Hydra had been given to him by Steve. Completely devastated. Then there is only one conclusion: he is guarding against S.H.I.E.L.D. and the US government. A new element that can replace the existing energy source and energy equipment with it as the core. This is an invention that can change the world. Entrust such a wonderful thing in terms of human honesty and trustworthiness. Please, everyone is an adult. Don't make trouble. This thing is enough to make Tony's importance rise to the level of the President of the United States. This is the real amulet he left for his son. Of course, Tony's own intelligence and emotional intelligence are also worthy of admiration. Although he did not mass-produce steel suits, he wisely gave the army a steel patriot, and generously put new energy into the society with normal commercial methods. Look at what those who are as smart as him have done. Dr. Pym invented the Ant-Man armor, but he didn't want to share it with anyone, so he was immediately kicked out of S.H.I.E.L.D. After Dr. Hulk transformed Lost Sanity, the government is obviously more willing to put the treasure on General Ross. Of course, Kane does not have the ability to invent and create like Tony and the smarter old man, but he knows another way, which is to have strong strength and enough important allies. He knows history, when a person and allies, when everyone is strong, even if he is just a nobody in society, he will leave a strong mark in history. Of course, this is a cruel and real world. Strength alone is not enough, a correct value is also needed. The strength of the villains is not small, but they stand on the opposite side of the whole world. The power of a single human may not be strong, but the power of the whole society is infinite, especially when these powers are concentrated in violent institutions. Before joining the Avengers, Hulk also lived a life of wandering for a while, unable to meet his relatives, loved ones and friends, so ghosts believe him it is voluntary. So Kane now sees very clearly that if he doesn't want a street hero like Spider-Man to be toyed with and applauded at will, and he doesn't want to be a villain who is hunted down everywhere, he must aggravate his words in front of everyone, right, and that requires one's own strong strength and one's own clear position. It is an attempt to have a good relationship with Phil Coulson. It is definitely not a bad thing to have someone who can speak for oneself in S.H.I.E.L.D. After returning to the bar, Kane took Morena directly to the basement. He was very interested in what he had learned from Dr. Otto and needed to study it with Morena. Peter didn't go with him. He knew it was the place where Kane and the others studied magic. He had also observed it before. Kane had never avoided him in the field of magic, but the so-called magic of another kind of science was still very important to Peter. It was too obscure to understand, and he was unwilling to go down to visit after only seeing it twice. When he came to the basement, Kane scanned his surroundings to make sure there was no one else, and then sat cross-legged in a magic circle in the middle of the basement. Although there was Pippi looking after the house, this was the world of Marvel after all, so it was okay to be cautious. Wrong. The black circular magic circle is drawn with blood. It helps Rothma priests to control spells more accurately, which is why Kane has kept Pippi guarding here. He does not want people to misunderstand that he is what a cult wizard. A few drops of green liquid emerged from Kane's palm. It was something he had sucked from Dr. Otto's soul. It was suspended in the air and was still dishonest, constantly changing its shape as if it was alive. Close your eyes and perceive carefully. Destruction, killing, destruction, even if there is only such a little. Kane can feel a trace of manic emotions constantly being released from the green liquid. It seems that this is the culprit that caused Dr. Otto to mutate. Morena, what do you think of this thing? Kane asked after opening his eyes. A thick finger stretched out towards the mass of green liquid. It was Morena's finger. It was neither slender nor beautiful. It was caused by the blood crow drawing the bow for many years, although this body was a bullseye corpse. Transformed, but under the transformation of her soul, the final formed fingers are still thick and scary. She really deserves to be a famous female warrior. Everything is based on combat effectiveness. Kane couldn't help admiring in his heart when he looked at Morena, who had closed his eyes. Cruel, there is no essential difference between women and men. If you want to survive, strong combat power is the only thing you can rely on. Morena's big blue eyes suddenly opened, and Kane, who had been staring at her, touched his nose guiltily. The blood crow didn't pay much attention, but looked at the green liquid on his finger and said, "Kill and destroy." The aura of this drop of green blood is very similar to what I felt after being corrupted, but it should not come from the 7 great demon kings. A demon from beast form. You said it was blood. Morena's words brought Kane's attention back to the liquid. Yes, devil's blood, which has a strong sulfur smell. Whoosh, a pale dagger appeared in Kane's hand. It was the bone dagger of Rothma. As the first Nephilim, a direct descendant of angels and demons, Rothma possessed abilities beyond his parents. Even if the bones are also so different, the tip of the bone dagger slowly approached the green liquid, and the manic liquid seemed to feel something and changed more crazily, but it was futile under the control of Kane's magical power. When the bone dagger finally touched the mass of liquid, it was absorbed in an instant. The bone dagger flickered for a moment, and a stream of pure spirit power was directly transmitted from the handle to Kane's body. Ah, Kane groaned comfortably, opened his eyes after a while and looked at the bone dagger in his hand in amazement. I never imagined that the spirit content in the blood of the devil is so strong, even better than the strengthened body of Dr. Lizard. Quote, it's not surprising. Priests of Rothma are the natural enemies of angels and demons, and conversely, angels and demons are also the best prey for priests of Rothma. As far as I know, there was once a fallen master of the dead who hunted angels and demons. During that time all demons and angels were in danger, and the high-level heaven was even closed for a period of time to avoid his pursuit. Morena told Kane the illusions she knew. Kane's eyes straightened when he heard that. He didn't know that there was such a tough character among his predecessors. He asked quickly, what happened later? I heard that he was captured by Razma himself. I don't know what happened after that. Teacher Rothma took him personally. Why, what did he do? It seems that he himself wanted to absorb enough angel and demon spirits to become a god. Razma worried that he would cause heaven and hell to join forces to destroy the world of Sanctuary, so he took him away. Kane was speechless for a while. Well, this senior's ambition is really lofty. At first glance, it looks like the ultimate villain's routine. If you don't die, you won't die. In this world now, does the blood of angels contain a lot of pure soul power? There is no way to know, but the devil's blood must be of great help to his mana improvement, so Kane immediately dialed the phone. Hello, Phil, I'm Kane. Yes, I just discovered one thing. Dr. Otto's mutation was not due to an accident, but someone injected demon blood into his body. Yes, I'm not joking. You can accept the fact that I'm a necromancer. Why don't you believe in angels and demons? Yes, you can investigate in detail who or where Dr. Otto has come into contact with recently, may be able to find the clues of the devil. My purpose. It's very simple. I hope to notify me after you find the trace of the demon. I want to act together with you. Of course it is good for me, the blood of the devil can greatly improve my mana. Don't worry, I will not be affected, and my magic has a restraint effect on the devil, otherwise how do you think I discovered Dr. Otto the reason for the mutation? Okay, I am waiting for your good news. Kane smiled and hung up the phone. Regardless of whether you were looking for people or demons, of course you need a professional counterpart. SHIELD is the most powerful organization in the United States for finding people, especially when supernatural forces are involved. Kane is not worried about himself at all. They will definitely try to deal with creatures like demons by themselves at the beginning. Once they find that they can't solve them, they will think of him. With Nick Fury as the leader, SHIELD will help superheroes for free. You will definitely have fun with this matter. While Kane was studying the drop of demonic blood, a man in black was reporting to Norman Osborn in the study of Osborn's mansion. Boss, Dr. Otto failed, and it was Spider-Man and Death Rattle who did it. And with the Death Rattler is a woman who wields a bow and arrow. Norman Osborn did not express anything special about this, but asked calmly, how is Dr. Otto's ability? The body is very strong, at least Spider-Man alone can't solve it, but it seems that there are some problems with the mind, which is completely incomparable with the previous IQ. It's okay, he is also an experimental product anyway, but he has verified that the effect of our reagent is not bad. Well, let's carry out the next step plan. Yes, boss. At this moment, a gold and red humanoid mecha was flying over Central Asia, and the frontier was the border of Afghanistan, across, like a shooting star. Of course, Tony Stark's steel suit with such a slapstick paint job, he immediately started to develop this epic-making product after returning home. The few days of suffering in Afghanistan have given him enough motivation. Stark, who is serious, is definitely worthy of the title of genius. After countless failures, he finally developed the Mark II steel suit. After testing the various attributes of the Mark II, he immediately started to install the weapon system on the suit. Since he used it himself, he integrated all the highest-end weapons that had not yet been mass-produced into the steel suit. When N said that he would no longer develop weapons, he did not refer to these things. In his bones, he was still a big boy looking for excitement. At most, he could guarantee to close down his weapon research and development and manufacturing factories. I named them toys myself. Since the purpose of the steel suit is mainly for combat, the actual combat test is naturally indispensable. At this time, Tony immediately thought of the 10 Rings gang who made a big hole in his chest, so he drove directly wearing a steel battle suit. He flew halfway across the earth and came here. The deserted outpost on the border flew under Mark II, and Tony called his smart butler, Jarvis, help me find the 10 Rings gang. Okay, sir. An electronically synthesized voice sounded in the helmet, and soon, a holographic TV picture appeared in front of Tony's eyes. It was an aerial picture showing a small Afghan village with countless armed forces. Mobs are breaking into houses door to door. Countless children and women are driven into trucks by them, while adult men are gathered in front of a wall. Jarvis' electronically synthesized voice sounded again, Sir, this is a village near the border, about 20 miles away from you. The picture comes from a reconnaissance plane of the U.S. military. As the largest arms supplier to the U.S. military, Stark can easily finding a system backdoor is also a reasonable thing to do. Jarvis, give me the coordinates. Following Tony's order, the navigation route map appeared in front of his eyes, and then he immediately increased the output power of the jets under his feet, turned an ecstatic arc in the air, and flew towards the target. Da da da. Bursts of gunshots rang through an ordinary small village in Afghanistan. After all, this uncontested place failed to escape the fire of war. Groups of thugs entered their homes with the latest weapons. They were driven together like cattle and sheep by category. The women and children on the truck were crying. The gun-toting thugs behind their relatives gave them an ominous premonition. Don't look, tell the children to turn their heads back, you have to live well. An Afghan man who was being pushed against the wall said to his lover with sobs. He knew that he would soon be with his wife and children. It's been forever, but at least his child is still alive, and there is hope in life. Although he doesn't know where the hope is, he still wants his family to believe it. The gun-toting thugs didn't give him too much time to leave his last words. One of the bearded men roughly pushed him to the wall and pulled the bolt. Obviously, the man's behavior had angered him. Lord, help me overcome the pain and hardship of death. The man rested his head against the earthen wall, praying silently, expecting a miracle to happen at the last moment of his life. Bang! The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground sounded behind him, followed by the roar of the mob. Who are you and what are you here for? Boom, boom, da da da. A strange voice sounded behind the man, and he couldn't help turning his head back. The scene in front of him made him feel like he was dreaming. A robot like a sci-fi movie was fighting those armed thugs. His fist was powerful, and he punched a thug flying over the roof. His armor was so strong that he could ignore the guns in the hands of the thugs. He was like Allah descending into the world and punishing the thugs. However, the robot soon ran into trouble. A few thugs standing by the car took the villagers as hostages and shouted at them with guns. Soon, all the thugs in the village gathered here, surround that robot. The man watched this scene nervously. His wife and children were among the hostages, but he couldn't say anything, because it was already a miracle that this stranger could save them, and he couldn't ask for more. If his son died because of this, and he could only lament that it was Allah who arranged all this, making his wife and children the victims of saving the whole village. The development of the matter was beyond the man's expectations again. The robot put down its hands that could shoot laser light, but when the thugs breathed a sigh of relief, it protruded two devices from its shoulders, and fired countless small missiles to hit the target accurately. Every thug, oh not all of them, had a bearded man who tripped over something and dodged the blow. Tony Stark, who was in Mark II, knew very well that it was not a problem with the aiming system. The video playback showed that a rubber bullet hit the bearded man's neck artery from the side, stunned him and made him dodge at the same time, took his fatal blow. Tony turned on the energy cannon in his palm again and aimed it at the side. Although the rubber bullet hit the Ten Rings mob, it was not certain that it was the ally who fired the shot. However, he put his hands down immediately, because it was really an ally who came out from the back of the house. The Punisher in a desert camouflage combat uniform waved at him with a gun, and pointed to the US military logo on his body. Frank, why are you here? Tony knew that Frank didn't recognize his equipment, so he quickly raised his mask to let him see his face. I should ask this question. Frank didn't expect that there was an acquaintance here, and he was a rich man who needed to be rescued by himself before. Why do you, a billionaire, appear here? Of course it's because of these fools. Tony pointed to the corpses of the thugs on the ground. Do you think I look like a generous person, and they are holding weapons produced by our company? The terrorist organization's sales contract was signed. Well, now it's your turn to answer my questions. Frank walked over, picked up the stunned beard and said, it's because of him. He is the second in command of a child soldier training camp. I need to ask him about the specific location of the training camp. Originally I was killed them one by one from the periphery, but I didn't expect you to come, which saved me a lot of trouble. Well, as a reward for saving me, I'll help you this time. Speaking of this, he remembered something, and turned to the stunned villagers and asked, who has food? I flew from the United States overnight. I haven't eaten anything since I came here. Half an hour later, Frank came out of a room and wiped his hands with a cloth, which was stained with blood. Hey, are you hungry? I have another one here. Oh, what are they called? By the way, naan, do you want to eat some? It tastes good, Tony said to Frank while gnawing on the local baked naan in Afghanistan. He has no special feelings about Frank's way of extracting confessions, because he has experienced a lot in the cave of the Ten Rings gang, and he has no psychological burden at all to use these methods on them. Tony gently drove away the curious Afghan children who surrounded him, and passed the baked naan. How is it? Did you find anything? Yes, I already know the location of one of their secret training camps. Frank nodded, took a bite of naan and said, then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Tony stuffed the last mouthful of naan into his mouth, immediately put his helmet down and started to lift off. Seeing this, Frank shook his head, finished eating the naan in 3 mouthfuls, packed up his equipment, got on a motorcycle and drove out of the village. There is no problem with Frank and Tony's goal. That training camp is the largest secret training camp of the Ten Rings in Afghanistan. It contains a large amount of supplies of the Ten Rings, and even their top commander in Afghanistan. At the time, the Supreme Commander appeared in another place with a team of people. Several SUVs drove into a temporary camp in the wilderness of Afghanistan. Surrounded by tough gangsters with guns and the 10 rings on their bodies showed their identity, the 10 Rings Gang. After the car came to a complete stop, a bald old man walked down surrounded by several bodyguard-like men in black. People who often follow the news must recognize him. He is the CEO of the Stark Group, Obadiah Stan. Looking at the dust-covered appearance of the 10 Commandments gang gangsters around him, Obadiah frowned involuntarily, and led them quickly towards the big tent in the middle of the camp. Opening the curtain and walking into the tent, another bald head appeared in Obadiah's sight. It was the leader who had appeared in Tony's prison. Boom! Obadiah rushed to the table, slapped it on the table, glared at the bald head and said, "You idiot, didn't I tell you that I would kill Tony directly? Look at what you have done. He is now just being happy in the United States. Is this how you 10 Rings Gang do things? Fortunately, I even shipped the equipment to you in advance." Hearing Obadiah insulting the 10 Commandments gang, the bald man couldn't help emitting 2 red lights in his eyes, staring at Obadiah and said, "We don't need you to make irresponsible remarks about our 10 Rings Gang's work." Seeing the abnormality in the bald head's eyes, Obadiah finally calmed down. He chose the 10 Rings Gang as his partner not only because they were the best choice to make a move, but also because there was a mysterious force behind them, and now they are in Afghanistan, which is the territory of the other party. Although they were driven into a panic by the Wagwo government and the Shakespeare Bureau, he is not a businessman who can dictate. This is different from our original agreement. Obadiah finally softened. Hey, a few photos were thrown in front of Obadiah. It was Tony's heroic appearance in the small Afghan village a few days ago. The bald head did not continue to persecute Obadiah. After all, this guy can bring them a lot. It is enough to let him understand the relationship between each other. So he resumed his normal tone and said, "But I don't think what we did was wrong. Look at this, it was just filmed 3 days ago. Look, coming to Tony Stark isn't like spending time in America like you might think." How is this possible? Obadiah flipped through the photos in amazement. There was even a picture of Tony eating bread in it. He couldn't allow him to accept this fact. "I've never seen anything on him before. I think I can give you some clues." The bald man smiled, and took out a dozen blueprints again, which were the design blueprints of Mark I, the first generation of the steel suit left by Tony in the cave. "Oh my God, this is..." Obadiah flipped through the blueprints, and had to accept the fact that Tony is a genius. Just imagine, if it were another person, he would have collapsed in such an extreme situation. How could he be rational? Design a new escape gear before your enemies even notice it. With these blueprints and those semi-finished products, can you make the same steel suit? The bald head opened the felt cloth on one side of the tent, revealing a pile of parts left by Tony, and asked. Of course, these drawings are already very detailed. With these parts, it is not a problem to manufacture the same, oh no, a bigger and stronger steel suit. Its core driving device is produced by the Stark Group. The arc reactor, of course, the one in the group is bigger, but I think it's only a matter of time before I call in technicians to shrink it. Obadiah said excitedly, rubbing his palms. He couldn't help but be unhappy. As soon as Tony returned to the United States, he announced the closure of all the military industries under the Stark Group and a comprehensive transformation to the direction of new energy. This is stepping on Obadiah's tail. As the veteran of the Stark Group, coupled with the fact that Tony didn't like to care about business matters before, Obadiah often took advantage of his position to make a lot of money in the military industry, not to mention the 10 Rings Gang. There are more than half of the terrorist organizations or anti-government armed forces in the world, all with the weapons he smuggled out. With these funds, Obadiah even bought a few congressmen to cover up these crimes in Parliament for him, and as Tony announced the shutdown of the military industry, it was tantamount to cutting off Obadiah's financial resources. Obadiah was caught off guard. You must know that the reason why he wanted to kill Tony was to completely control the Stark Group. Almost all of his plans fell through, and even some people in the US military who had always been on good terms with him now complained about him. But this time it is different with the steel battle suit. As long as it can be produced smoothly, the US military will kneel and lick it like a dog. This is the kind of weapon that can change the world pattern. Of course, the premise is that he becomes the leader of the Stark Group. Thinking of this, he immediately looked up at the bald head. It's useless for me to research and manufacture it. Tony has announced the closure of all military industrial enterprises. As long as he is alive, I will not be able to mass-produce this steel suit. Quote. Looking at Opidry's ambitious eyes, he baldly smiled. This is one of the reasons why they chose Opidry as their partner. Ambitious people are easier to control. He looked at the black man next to Opidry. The man in the clothes said, "Your bodyguards are too weak, let me recommend two to you." Obadiah frowned, not understanding what the bald head meant when he suddenly changed the subject. The head of the bodyguard behind him was a little unhappy, and he planned to show the bumpkin in front of him. He took out a pistol from his pocket and pointed it at the bald head as quickly as possible. But as soon as the gun was pulled out, it was pulled by a huge force and flew out of his hand. He looked in horror behind the bald head. There were two masked big men standing there. At first he thought they were just two ordinary men, but now, the big man standing on the right was playing with his pistol in his hand. What was even more frightening was, he did not touch the pistol, but used an energy similar to a force field to make the pistol float in the air. How about you make the steel suit, and I guarantee that Tony will die unexpectedly. Baldhead said with a smile. Obadiah also laughed. He seemed to have seen Tony's death. As for killing the donkey, he didn't worry at all. He was the only one in the world who could make a steel suit and sell it to the 10 rings. Did they make it with stoves in the mountains of Afghanistan? Deal. Obadiah and the bald head held hands together. Everyone does some stupid things in their teenage years, but it's also a smile on your lips when you look back on it later. Of course, now our Mr. Spider-Man may not be able to laugh, because the stupid things he did, oh no, the stupid things he said will be exposed soon, and the ordinary stupid things are fine. What he said to the girl, he likes stupid words, but he didn't know what to do. Usually, the average boy's choice is to consult his friends around him, and Peter is no exception. Although he is much stronger than the average boy, he still made the same choice and put down the work at hand. He hesitated. Came to Kane. "What's the matter, Peter?" Kane asked. He had already noticed that Peter's state today was not right, and he was a little out of his wits. Kane, tell me, if a boy tells a not-so-bad lie in order to please a girl, will God forgive him and help him lie quietly? Okay. Kane put down the wine glass in his hand, looked at Peter helplessly and said, "What did you say that you need me to help you? Also, next time you have a question like this, be more direct. I am afraid that the spells I have now have a little conflict with God, the old man." Peter scratched his head shyly. "Hey, it's like this, I met a girl in the Osborn laboratory, and later learned through contact that she was my classmate, named Gwen Stacy. I admire her very much, and I think she also has a good impression of me, so after leaving the Osborn group and Auto Labs, I lied to him that I opened a bar with my friends." Oh, it's okay for a young boy to lie about being a bar owner for the sake of his image in his girlfriend's mind. I can totally understand it. You can ask her to come over someday, and I'll explain it to her. Kane, in fact she will come here tonight, and my other friend Harry and his girlfriend Mary, they plan to come here to have dinner with me. Peter clasped his hands and begged Kane, "I know I shouldn't lie, but at the time I really didn't expect the consequences. Please, Kane, oh no, boss, please help me once." You know Peter, after a lie, it often takes countless lies to cover it up. There is no end to it. You might as well just tell the truth. Anyway, you don't have to worry about losing your job one day. Kane shook. He nodded and said, he never thought that this kind of bloody school drama would happen to Spider-Man. He doesn't care if he helps Peter. The problem is that this matter is very troublesome. Who knows, one day he forgot to say the most, so that's it. Embarrassed. Please, Kane, I will find a chance to explain to Gwen, but not today, and Harry and the others are here. Please, just help me this time, please. Okay, it's just this one time, it's not an example. Unable to resist Peter's soft-heartedness, Kane finally agreed, and as a punishment, he also withheld Peter's salary for a week, but he finally paid for the tip. Still didn't have the heart to deduct it, which already made Peter very grateful. However, this does not mean that Kane will spare him lightly. Since he is here for a dinner party, Kane will certainly not be so stupid as to let him eat a hamburger. I still learned a few cooking skills from my grandfather, so at least I can handle a dinner party. Of course, the ingredients must be prepared in advance. Kane wrote a full page of ingredients and handed them over to Peter. Soon, New Yorkers once again saw their good neighbor dangling in the sky, only today he wasn't out to fight crime. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the bar with the closed sign welcomed 3 guests, a man, 2 women, and since it was a formal dinner, all 3 of them were dressed in formal attire. Needless to say, Harry Osborn, who has good genes, was dressed in a suit. The decent casual suit has a youthful and talented atmosphere, and his girlfriend Mary Jane, as an actress who is stepping into Broadway, exudes a charming flavor in every gesture. Even Peter's little girlfriend, Gwen, is also well dressed enough, definitely not inferior to the 2 in front. On the other hand, Peter, with a stiff look, made Kane couldn't help sighing that at least this kid was lucky, and not everyone could catch up with Baifume's reverse push. Just when Kane was about to go up to greet him, there was another sound of opening the door, and Matt Murdock led a black-haired girl in. Seeing Kane's surprised expression, Peter hurried to his ear. Bian whispered, "I met Matt when I was shopping. I thought it would be safer for 2 people to testify together, so I invited him to have dinner together." Kane stared at Peter silently, thinking that his brain circuit must be infected with the spider virus. What kind of emotional intelligence is this to think that it would be more convincing for 2 people to help lie? Well, even if you're thinking correct, but the problem is that this matter is not a matter of high credibility at all. Well, you have to have a lot of free time to tell another friend about this kind of scandal. There is no way, now that he has agreed, Kane can only continue to play tricks. He walked over to Matt and hugged him, and asked in his ear, "How could you agree to such a ridiculous thing?" Matt shrugged with a smile, "It's nothing, I think it's very interesting. I haven't seen you for a long time, I just came over for a meal." "Forget it, 1 sheep is also hurting 2 sheep, Kane doesn't care, anyway, it's Peter's bad luck if he messes up, and it's nothing to do with him." After everyone arrived, everyone introduced each other. The girl brought by Matt is his junior sister Erica, who according to him was sent by his teacher Gunsu to experience life. Now that everyone is here, Kane begins to serve everyone. Kane chose American cuisine for today's dinner, which is more casual than the French dinner. After the starter salad and soup, he served the main course, which is his best grilled fish, which is different from the American method. He chose the whole salmon to be grilled with sauce, and then sprinkled with secret seasoning and special sauce when it came out of the pan. This exotic grilling method won everyone's praise. Harry couldn't help giving Kane a thumbs up. "Oh my God, Kane, I heard that Chinese people are culinary geniuses and I didn't believe it. Such deliciousness, to be honest, this is the best salmon I have ever eaten. You must copy the cooking method for me, and I will give it to my chef as a reserved dish." "Oh, Harry, you understand that as a family business, every small boss will have some ancestral skills in his hands, right?" Kane accepted Harry's praise with a smile, and his feelings for this little green goblin not bad. At least his conversation is very educated, and he doesn't mean to look down on people in the slightest. Moreover, he can become friends with poor Peter, and he doesn't want to become enemies with him if he can. Just when the bar was filled with laughter, 2 teams of masked men gathered on the roof opposite the bar. They were all wearing the same style of night clothes. The 2 leaders seemed surprised to see each other. "Why are you here?" "Of course it's to kill my target, how about you?" "Just like you, I also came to kill the target." Could it be? The 2 turned their heads to look at the bar at the same time. Peter is very depressed now. He is bored with the plate of salmon in front of him. It's not that the grilled fish is not delicious, the problem is that all his preparations today seem to be in vain, and even seem to have the opposite effect. Gwen hadn't the slightest suspicion of his identity, and in fact she hadn't had time to bring it up tonight because the 3 chatty guys in the room had her attention completely absorbed. Harry, who came from a wealthy background, although he hangs out with him in college, he went to a noble school in high school, and he has learned how to communicate with others, and he can make witty remarks from time to time, which will brighten the atmosphere. Kane, who was born as a bartender, is also good at chatting. Coupled with the history he has learned, he can pick out a few humorous historical allusions and make everyone laugh. As for Matt, Peter was so annoyed that he completely forgot Matt's official occupation, lawyer, before the invitation. Can tell lies, his eloquence is recognized by authority. Peter felt that he must be punished by God for lying, otherwise he wouldn't have a cramp and take Gwen to dinner with these 3 guys. Well, he hardly had a chance to speak during the whole dinner. Even if he was given a chance, he didn't know what to say. How about describing the application of nuclear physics in biological genetic engineering to everyone? Don't think about it. Shaw, he couldn't turn on the mouthpiece mode, and he even suspected that this was also a change brought about by the spider gene. A slender palm covered Peter's hand. He looked in surprise. Gwen was looking at him with charming big eyes, and whispered, "Don't worry, although you are not as talkative as them, you are the same. There are strengths, everyone is good at something different, and there's nothing to be upset about." Gwen. Peter was moved and held her hand back. With such a caring girl, Peter felt that he would have no regrets in this life. "Anyway, you've been the target of everyone's ridicule since you were in school. You should get used to it." Gwen smiled slyly at him and stuck out her tongue. Although this little joke made Peter feel much better, but it also made him depressed again. Just when he couldn't help but want to fight back, a warning sign suddenly appeared in his heart, and a sense of danger was approaching at high speed. "Be careful." Peter took another step slowly, and it was Matt who was near the door who shouted this sentence, and there were 2 men and 2 women who stood up with him, and he was the shortest one among them. The 2 men are Kane and Matt, and the 2 women are of course Morena and Erica. Swish, there is no movement. The 2 ladies are the first to draw out their weapons. Morena is fine, hidden in the body. Where did Erica get those 10 hands? You must know that she is wearing an evening dress. Wow, Peter didn't have time to feel emotional. A sudden dart smashed through the window of the bar and flew in. The density obviously didn't intend to leave a living. Protect the others. Before Peter rushed out, Matt and Kane went up to meet them, and together with Erica intercepted the flying darts. Matt used his special blind stick, and Kane then he took out his bone dagger from nowhere. Peter is depressed again. He is not good at weapons like those 2. The spider spinner is on his wrist. The problem is that this thing is too easy to reveal his identity. Presumably that is why Kane and the others will not let him shoot, but so as soon as he came, it seemed that he was a bit useless. Kill it. A group of ninjas in night clothes rushed into the bar following the darts, and a cold light flashed on the Japanese swords in their hands. However, someone was faster than them. Before they started to form, 4 bone arrows hit 4 of them. The powerful impact made the bone arrows directly penetrate their chests, and one of them went straight into their chests, into the chest of a ninja behind. Morena's shooting skills were still so sharp, but the scene behind them was different from what they imagined. The 5 ninjas who were hit by the arrows did not fall down, but turned into black dust with strange screams, floating in the air. What the hell is this? Kane couldn't help but frowned and scolded. These ghosts had never appeared in the Marvel movies he had seen. He began to suspect that it had something to do with the demon blood on Dr. Otto's body. It's the hand. Be careful, they are not afraid of death. Matt and Erica did know them, but this made their faces even uglier, and it seemed that there was nothing good about them. These are the killers bought by the gangsters. Kane remembered the name of the Hand, which was the assassin organization that Matt reminded him last time. However, what Kane didn't know was that Matt had already fought against the Hand after that, and the reason was now Erica, the junior sister standing beside him. Erica, who is skilled in martial arts, joined the Hand Association for various reasons and wanted to avenge her father, but was discovered by the mysterious master in the Hand Association and was hunted down. At a critical moment, she was rescued by the Stick Man, and she was accepted as a disciple to learn martial arts. However, the cruel Hand had no intention of letting go of the traitors. Under the search of them and the New York gangsters, the secret organization founded by the Old Man, the Holy Society, was finally discovered. The Old Man knew that the Holy Society could not fight against the Hand for the time being, so he could only be forced to transfer. Before that, he also entrusted Erica to Matt, hoping that she could hide in the city. Unfortunately, because Matt had appeared in the battle between the Holy Society and the Hand, his distinctive features were finally recognized by the ninjas of the Hand, which led to this scene tonight. As for the other wave of ninjas, it was also sent by the Hand, but it was to deal with Kane, and they have been collecting money for a long time. It is time to give an explanation to the gangsters who paid the money. The strange way of death of the companions did not frighten the ninja killers of the Hand, on the contrary, it seemed to arouse their ferocity. Following another sharp command from outside the door, all the ninja killers looked at them with fierce eyes. Kill over here. Kane, who didn't dare to trust him, immediately gathered a layer of bone armor under his jacket, and then brandished a bone dagger to fight with those ninjas. As soon as Pooh fought, he found that the strength and agility of these ninjas were no more than ordinary people. However, the trouble is that their attacks really disregarded life and death. Seeing Kane's bone dagger cut the throat of a ninja, he cut it in Kane's abdomen without hesitation before dying. Fortunately, he put on the bone armor. Before Kane was happy, 2 more ninjas brandished short knives and attacked him through the black dust after the death of their companions. The protection is basically equal to none. This kind of attack method made Kane, who is familiar with history, can't help but think of the Japanese kamikaze squad during World War II. Little Japan seems to have a soft spot for such a life-threatening attack method. This is also the basis for the hand to gain a foothold in New York, a city full of guns. Fearless and risking your life are fundamentally 2 concepts. No matter how fierce gangsters can withstand such an attack, let alone those or the person protected by the bodyguard, how many witnesses died under the sword of the hand. Frank even had conflicts with them because of this, but Frank, who was just an ordinary person, retreated in the end. He didn't even mention this to Kane, just because he was afraid that he would find these desperate lunatics on the spur of the moment. But now it seems that the conflict is inevitable. Kane wielded a bone dagger and fought with the ninjas of the hand. Because he was afraid of revealing his identity and could not use magic, he was not the most conspicuous among the crowd. Of course, even Blind Matt wasn't the most conspicuous of them all, it was the 2 ladies who caught the eye the most. There is a huge contrast between the soft and beautiful women and the violent scenes of flesh and blood. Erica is a martial arts genius. For various reasons, her shots are more ruthless than Matt, and the pair of 10 hands are beautiful in her hands. And deadly, unlike the traditional 10 hands, Erica, who likes to attack, gave it a front. In addition to being able to use it to block, she can also kill enemies with the sharp part of the short sword in the middle. She stabbed 2 ninjas in the throat and turned them into ashes. If Erica's movements are as beautiful and deadly as a butterfly, then Morena's bow and arrow are like the poisonous tail needle of a wasp. The concept of distance does not exist for her. Ninjas, even ninjas who are not afraid of death, have begun to avoid the edge for the time being. It is one thing not to be afraid of death, but another thing to die. At %, a string of Japanese words sounded from outside the bar, and the ninjas in the room immediately changed their tactics. Half of the ninjas entangled Kane and the others in close combat, and the other half of the ninjas sent a large number of darts at Morena, and then drew their knives and rushed after the darts. But they made a wrong calculation. Gro is not an archer in the general sense. In the dangerous world of Sanctuary, bows and arrows are their second life. Whether it is melee or long-range enemies, they all use bows and arrows to deal with them. Yes, so, this little trick of the hand ninja didn't make her panic at all. Papapa, the bone bow drew an arc and shot down all the darts flying towards her. However, she stopped shooting arrows in this way. She slapped their cheeks, and immediately after, the blood crow who turned around put 3 long arrows on the bone bow in her hand again, accurately hitting the enemy closest to her. Morena's flowing combo made Gwen's eyes sparkle. They had never seen such a beautiful and deadly fighting style. In addition, the dead ninjas were only turned into fly ash, which was bloody. The low-level fight made them feel like they were watching a stage play. Morena and Erica are amazing, and their movements are so beautiful, like dancing. Gwen was surprised to see the scene before her, which only appeared in movies. It's not that exciting in the movies. Yeah, I have never seen such a perfect fighting technique that combines beauty and skill, and it is so lethal. Now I feel that the boxing I have learned is a rough fight. Peter, you know them, you know this is what? Harry on the side couldn't help echoing. Probably because of Kung Fu. Peter replied gloomily. He really wanted to say that he was also very beautiful and deadly. Unfortunately, this can only be thought about, unless he is willing to disclose his identity, but he can't predict the consequences of. As the ninjas in the bar turned into ashes one after another, the commanders outside finally couldn't help it anymore. There was nothing wrong with dying, and it would be more troublesome if they couldn't complete the mission. Puffy, several small red balls flew into the bar, and before Kane and the others could react, they exploded, and a large cloud of red smoke immediately enveloped the bar, and Kane hurriedly shouted, "Cover your mouth and nose." Quote, "It's a smoke bomb." Erica, who had once penetrated into the Hand Guild, recognized this auxiliary item, but it also had the greatest impact on her. Erica, who couldn't see anything, took a few steps back and put 10 hands across the chest. After hearing that the smoke was non-toxic, Kane was relieved. He didn't care about the poisonous smoke, but there were ordinary people like Harry in the bar, but the enemy threw the smoke bomb so early, it was obvious that they didn't intend to retreat. Kane immediately opened the eyes of the spirit. The whole world immediately turned gray-white in Kane's eyes, and the smog in the air also lost its color, like a thin layer of mist that couldn't cover anything. Harry and the others showed a light red color, which was vitality, or what it should be called, the color of chi and blood, while Peter, Matt, and Erica are dark red, which means that the chi and blood in their bodies are more abundant than ordinary people. But now Kane pays more attention to those ninjas, because in his spirit eyes, the bodies of those ninjas are also gray and white. If it weren't for the redness in the heart and brain, they would look like dead people. What made him more concerned was that the two guys who jumped in with the smoke bombs had much more red areas on their bodies, and what was even more weird was that Kane saw black spots from them, like rust, attached to the red chi and blood. Even the weapons of the two newly added guys are different from those of the previous ninjas. One is holding a sickle with an iron chain at the end, and the other is wearing a pair of steel claws. Although they gave orders loudly outside the bar, these two people are obviously not innocent, because since they entered the bar through the smoke, they have not made a sound at all. It seems that their martial arts and skills are better than those ninjas before. Miscellaneous soldiers are much taller. However, Kane just sighed with emotion. I have to say that the ninjas of the gang were really unlucky. They chose to kill people in a superhero gathering. This reminded Kane of a joke in his previous life. A stupid thief rushed into the bank to rob, but all the customers pointed their guns at him, and he caught up with the FBI to pay his salary. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.